Okay, so welcome members, and just would like to welcome those people watching online today, and if you can ensure your mobile phones are muted, and just a reminder that recording and photography of the meeting is not allowed. Okay, so just to proceed then, so we've had apologies from Sinead McLaughlin and Stuart Dixon.
Yes.
And I'm just going to ask if there are any declarations of interest to declare.
I have an interest, Chair, just in relation to agenda item 7.
Okay.
I just want to put on record that my mother actually resided in a mother and baby home. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Anya. And I'm just wondering, Clark, then, will we keep that as a standing declaration that would maybe save you having to say it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Anya. Okay, so Chairperson's business then, so just to refer you to pages 6 to 14 of your pack, and this relates to information received, the summary report, from the PSNI's investigation into mother and baby institutions, Magdalen laundries and workhouses 1922 to 1990. So just to advise, to date there have been 107 referrals made to the Police Service of Northern Ireland in relation to this investigation. Dates, offences and grievances alleged, including locations, are contained within the report. The investigation is approaching conclusion. However, the PSNI will continue to encourage and support victims of any form of non-recent child abuse and historical institutional abuse to come forward and report their experiences. So I wonder, should we get a press statement out then to support the PSNI and encouraging people to come forward? That's the first thing. And then secondly, then to ask the PSNI for an oral briefing on this paper.
Be good.
And also I was wondering, it doesn't say, it's not marked confidential. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could share this information, maybe even on Monday at the familiarisation day. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, Chair, just need to check.
We just need to check.
Yeah, but doesn't. Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I mean, it's a fascinating report,
Yes.
also harrowing. You know,
It is.
I mean, just looking through, I noticed they have a couple of institutions that aren't named in the bill. You know, towards the end, so I'm sure we'll pick up on that, whether those are other institutions which are relevant.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brian. Yeah.
And in terms of, again, if it's all right to mention some of the statistics, whilst 107 referrals received from members of the public, and not just locally but from other countries where people have moved to, by far the largest number relate to Marionvale and Newry, 43, and 23 Marionville in Belfast.
Yeah.
And the others are much lower numbers, just single figures. 54 investigations ongoing, 53 finalised. Sadly, no criminal prosecutions anticipated. Named suspects, 14 identified, 12 are now deceased with the passage of time. Almost all of those were Good Shepherd sisters. But there are investigative actions are being undertaken to identify another 6 people. Also references there to the potential for unmarked mass graves, but they don't have evidence of if those exist at this stage. A sad comment there on adoptions. Consent in some cases had been provided by the child's mother, but this was in all likelihood not true informed consent in the way this is understood today. Some mothers stated they were requested to sign forms, but no one explained what the forms were.
Yeah.
And we've heard that in oral testimony as well. Very tragic. 53 allegations that relate to adoptions. 18 allegations that relate to incarceration or ill treatment. The investigation is currently approaching conclusion, but again, it helps very much capture what occurred and the consequences of that. It's a very useful report.
Yeah.
And it would be helpful to hear more from the police.
Absolutely. Timothy, please.
Yeah, very supportive. I've gotten the police in to talk us through this. I would like to see an updated paper, so once they do finish their there's another 53 to be finalised, and they say they're going to have them finalised by the end of July. So even when the committee's in possession of the updated information, if that could be circulated with us during the summer. It very much follows on from the testimonies we've heard. It was actually nice, it's not nice, but it was good to see the police having down in black and white very much reflected of what we've heard in this committee. A lot of times in closed testimony for obvious reasons. allegations of criminality, including sexual offences, physical abuse, illegal adoptions, was the one that hit me the hardest.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see the PSNI have been investigating that and the mass burial. So I welcome the report. I'm looking forward to seeing the final product once they have closed off the 107 investigations, to see what new information might come from that.
Okay,
And I think this would be good for the ones that have come in and give testimony, to see something like this, and if that could be shared with them.
Carol, please.
So as well as Brian and Timothy's comments, I completely agree with them. And so see, in terms of the organisations, see the workhouses,
Yes.
does it list somewhere where the workhouses were?
I think that there is a list in the first Queen's in UU.
Aye.
Yeah, I think we
Aye.
need to maybe pull that out, try to get
Aye.
some of the specifics.
I think that would be helpful, and then, as both Timothy and Brian have said, I think it would be helpful to have the PSNI in. I mean, say if you look at the current status, of the 107 reports received, there's the remainder of 11 investigations, and then it goes on to say that so on, let me see, page 5, the top of page 5, an investigative actions are being undertaken to identify further 6 persons, and it's not straightforward. I mean, I suppose at this stage it would be something we could ask the police at what level those investigations are at, because as you know, Paula, the HIA, a lot of people had died, because of their age and that. And then the other thing is, in advance of the PSNI coming, just what level their investigations were with the Gardaí in relation to cross-border movement of children. Because that's, it says there are currently 21 allegations that relate to cross-border movement of children, and there are currently 33 allegations that relate to adoption under false pretenses, really. And then the other thing I would like to ask is, see the withholding of information on page 7, and it says a number of the reports refer to withholding. This relates to individuals requesting information regarding their birth mothers. Is it, if that's all it was, then that's fine. No, I'm not saying not getting information is fine. I'm saying that because there's Article 2 and Article 8 issues there, but it would be helpful to get those questions to the police in advance, so we're at least they're kind of prepared when they come in front. But like Brian and Timothy, reading that, I mean, the more you read about this, the more angry you get.
I suppose just to follow on from Carol there, his comments there towards the bottom of that page around the incomplete and non-existent records, I'd like to almost get a sense of the degree to which they're struggling to actually complete their investigations thoroughly because of reports and records that are no longer here, have been demolished. Claire or Harry, would you want to go ahead, please, Harry?
Just more or less, I agree with what all has been said, and as Carol said about the workhouses, the places, but there's no dates as well. If we could have dates, maybe, if that's possible.
Massive,
Yeah,
or in terms of decades to cover.
yeah. Is that okay? Thank you.
All right, let me see. Claire, do you want to comment or?
Just to concur in relation to the police and the information that others have asked with in relation to that, I think that's something I would find interesting. So.
Okay, thank you. Brian, did you want back in?
Yeah, well, just to comment that, I mean, the workhouses does seem to be, as others have said, the least defined aspect of the bill. I mean, it does say it's 3C in the bill, workhouses within the meaning of the Poor Relief Acts, Northern Ireland, and it's only then women who were pregnant, gave birth in a workhouse, or a child born in a workhouse. So it won't be everybody
Yeah.
who was admitted to a workhouse. It's only about similar to the mother and baby institutions, people who were sent there to give birth or who were born there. But I don't see why we shouldn't have a definitive list. Because whilst it references the Poor Reliefs Act, 1838 to 1937. We do need clarification on the dates as well as the locations.
Or like we had a workhouse at the bottom of our street in Carrickhill, John Blacking House. Now it was for men, but it didn't close until the 80s. But even within that short geographical area, you had that workhouse, you had the private hospital in the Mater, you had the Salvation Army at Thorndale, you had Mater Day. I mean, I would say within 20 minutes walk, there are thousands of people impacted by this legislation. But the workhouses is so vague, other than the allegations that have been made about what happened in them.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault, it's the department who didn't put any definition on it. So if possible, and I went back and read Sean and Leanne's report and this, anything that was there before, and it's a mention, and it just raises a lot of curiosity.
Yeah, I think what the policy intent for the bill is around mothers or pregnant women and how they were mistreated, etc. And I think that some of the correspondence I think we all received was from people whose parents have been in workhouses and that they feel excluded from the redress. So I think it's something that we will have to come back to in terms of our scheme.
Sure.
Just on this report, so are we seeking as a committee to see if this can be shared?
Yeah, let's do a recap of the actions. Then.
Yeah, we have a number of actions. So there are 5 areas in which members would like either an update or a little more detail. So an update on the outstanding investigations and where we are, perhaps at the end of July on that. Mentioned more detail on, the cross-border movement of children and liaison with the Gardaí around that. An update on the detail around withholding information. Just finding out a little bit more about that. Again, the same for incomplete records.
Yeah, the extent to which.
The extent of that, and just getting a little bit more detail on that. And then finally, the piece around workhouses. So looking at more detail, locations, dates, and then an action also. I can go back to the PSNI just to clarify that this report can go into the public domain, and I can do that in the next 24 hours, certainly by Monday.
Okay.
Just final question or a final comment on that. I believe this report would give a lot of people confidence to come forward.
Yeah, and that's why we're talking about the press statement as well.
For the first time, people will see that the police are investigating this. Their issues relate to what's in here, and I think it's very important that it gets into the public domain.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure, could I just ask one question in relation to this as well? So, see, when it comes to, I know when there's a live investigation, the police need to be very careful. However, can we just make it clear, we're not investigating the police, we're trying to gather as much as all this because we're doing a legislation. Yeah. So we can make that clear and then almost just build a bank for ourselves going through this, because like even when I was reading stuff during the week, I was printing loads of stuff off with any references to it. And we all got correspondence from a young woman in relation to her mother who was in the workhouse in Dungannon. But it's the workhouse in a geographical area. I don't know if there's a formal title to them or not. And maybe that's something we could go back to the department on.
Yes.
I wonder, could we maybe ask Grays if they could do us a paper on the workhouses, not looking towards the back of the room at Thomas.
Oh,
everybody's Thomas, dun dun dun.
At least he's smiling. Yeah, that's a good sign.
Certainly.
We could ask. No, I think there's a gap. There's a gap. Okay, members, we'll move on then. So the next item of Chair's business.
Sorry, Chair, go ahead. Just in terms of the press statement, we'll get something drafted. Obviously, this is our last meeting, but if members are happy, we'll circulate that via email, and if there are any issues or anything, if you could come back to me, and then we can get that
So by
agreed.
encouraging people to come
Sure.
forward,
That's
please.
okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clark. Okay, oral statements then. So we'll refer you to pages 15 to 29 of the meeting pack. Just to advise, the committee has received copies of 3 oral statements from the First and Deputy First Minister on the Monday the 30th of June. These statements were in relation to the 43rd British Irish Council Summit meeting, which took place on the 13th of June, the North-South Ministerial Council on the 29th, North-South Ministerial Council's 29th plenary meeting, which took place on the 20th of June, and the second meeting of the East-West Council, which took place on the 12th of June. So just to ask you to note these statements. Okay, the Equality Commission, then, the legal paper and information around the Supreme Court judgment. So I'm going to refer you to pages 30 to 96 of your pack. Just to advise, the Equality Commission has published a paper giving its views on the legal position in Northern Ireland, following a review of the Supreme Court judgment in For Women Scotland versus the Scottish Ministers. Just to advise that the paper sets out a roadmap of the actions the Equality Commission will now take to achieve legal certainty. It also includes initial information for employers, service providers and public authorities. It is their view that the judgment will be highly persuasive in the Northern Ireland courts and tribunals in certain respects. However, the Commission has also concluded that significant legal uncertainties remain. Most importantly, the Supreme Court judgment did not consider the Article 2 commitments under the Windsor Framework. And I'm sure members will take this summer recess period to look at the paper in detail. And also just to suggest that if they wish, members may wish to respond to the consultation on this matter, which will be launched in the coming weeks. And more details can be found on the Equality Commission's website. Just asking you to note the paper, but I think you want to... Brian first, go ahead, Brian.
Yep, thank you, Chair. And well, it is frustrating that the Equality Commission has failed to deliver its guidance as promised by the end of June, and I'm not dismissing the complexity of unfortunately retained EU law here under the Windsor Framework and the 1998 agreement. But I did raise with the First Minister yesterday a topical question that I do think that the Executive Committee as a whole should be issuing interim guidance. I have no idea what the timescale for these 6 steps from the Equality Commission will be. Effectively, they're asking our own courts to decide, and with consultation either side of that. So I did say yesterday, I think this does vindicate the actions of the Communities Minister and the Education Minister in issuing their own guidance, particularly in relation to changing rooms and toilets in schools and for sports categories, that there does need to be protection of designated women-only spaces and categories. So I do think the Executive as a whole should be issuing guidance in the interim. The First Minister did not agree with that yesterday. But I'd welcome at least that 2 ministers did issue that. And I am concerned just about the timescale. I don't know whether we could write to the Equality Commission and ask them, can they give us an estimation of the timescale when they do expect to be able to issue guidance? But I have to be concerned that in the meantime, many institutions are left without certainty. I mean, it does refer to the Supreme Court ruling being highly persuasive, which indicates that I still think the most likely outcome is that it will apply in Northern Ireland, but I understand we don't have the Equality Act 2010 here. But at various stages it does explain that ruling will be highly persuasive in this part of the United Kingdom. So I would be interested if we could ask for a timescale from the Equality Commission.
Okay, go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, concerned. So what the Equality Commission told us on the 28th of May, that this will not be a statutory code of practice. To me, that opened the door that you had the Supreme Court ruling. We should have acted on that. We have received legal advice here. The Commission has received legal advice but haven't acted on that in neither case. And I'm concerned that now Stormont particularly is acting where we're left ourselves open to challenge on our policies. I do believe that the Supreme Court ruling was full, it was final, and instead of fronting up to that, the Equality Commission essentially have been ideologically captured with this movement, and found themselves now in a political arena where they shouldn't be. Very, very concerned that they have kicked this issue potentially with the 6 steps down the road for could be a couple of years, instead of facing up to the reality of where we are. Like if we take this building for example, I believe we're operating in a breach of the law, but the bigger concern I have is a piece over safeguarding, that we have school children coming in to this building and we are operating a policy that leaves us liable to challenge. I think that is a dereliction of duty, and the Commission and Stormont should really reconsider waiting on what the Equality Commission is, because they've got involved. They have not taken a position. Essentially they're hiding behind Article 2 of the Windsor Framework, whereas this has nothing to do with Article 2 of the Windsor Framework, and leaving Stormont open. Supreme Court ruling was clear what a woman is. It's regarding biological sex, and the Equality Commission, I would like to see them coming before this committee, that we can explore these issues with them further. I believe they have stepped outside the realms of what they were meant to do and give guidance, and they've entered a political arena now which leaves women in Northern Ireland, their rights have been diminished to what they are in the rest of GB. Think about it. When you step on a boat in Conryan and come into Larne, your rights are different on the other side of the Irish Sea, and that can't be allowed. It's the UK, it's a Supreme Court ruling, the highest court in the land, and what they have done here is bowed to this woke agenda that's come in.
Okay. Go ahead, Carol.
So I agree with writing to the Equality Commission to ask for an indicative time frame, because I think that's a reasonable question to ask. I think, I mean, the commentary here, and you wouldn't expect anything different from us, is political. It's ideological. It's where you sit in this. So I'm not getting into that. That's people's firmly held beliefs, and that's up to them. I completely disagree. I do think accusing the Equality Commission of stepping into a political arena isn't fair, and they're not here to defend themselves.
That's why I'd be keen that we do ask them to come.
Well, that's fair enough, Timothy, but my concern is that we have both Gordon Lyons and Paul Given acting outside of the guidelines, and I think that too could be opened.
They are acting outside the guidelines.
Guys, actually, sorry. We actually have got 3 items to get through today.
Are the guidelines?
Excuse me. Go ahead, Carol, and then I'm going to move on.
All I'm saying is that there's vulnerabilities in everything that everybody is attempting to do for the right reasons. So rather than us trying to second guess whatever someone's opinion or whatever the judgment is, we try and get the Equality Commission to appear in front of the committee if they will. But in advance of that, we try and get a timeline. Yeah. And that's all we can do.
Hold on, sorry. Is there not an indication that they're going to go to the appeals court for a declaratory relief to see around applications? So that could take some time. So I don't think it's right that we try to bring them in here and in some ways, to use your language, to accuse them of stuff whenever what they're trying to do is walk a very, very straight line on this. So we have 2 proposals. We've got one around writing to ask about timescales from Brian. I'm happy to support that. Any dissenting views?
Yeah, no.
Okay, and the second one was to invite them to committee. Do you want to propose it?
I would propose that.
I'll second that.
Okay. No, I don't think the timing's right.
Well, even if they're coming in front of committee, to outline what steps that they need to take to do it, rather than to try and do a complete review of the judgment. I mean, they might want to do that in correspondence, but I think it's important that this committee knows what the steps are that the Equality Commission feel they need to take in order to issue guidelines.
Okay.
So even if that's by correspondence, at least we'll know.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please, Harry.
I just think, Chair, it would do no harm to ask them and see what they come back with, see if they say
they're
agreeable.
Your opinion.
Okay.
Claire, what's your thoughts on this?
Look, it's if for whatever reason or any responsibilities they have around attending or not attending, let it be them that say that to us. So, I'm happy to put the invite, and if they can't, they can outline why not, and maybe that means at a later date. So
okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
So happy to invite them to committee.
Very small, Timothy, honestly, 10 seconds.
So there's an absolute void here of legal opinion. So we got legal advice, which I believe the privilege was vested in committee, and the committee wouldn't release. What other options is there to the Stormont Assembly, to the executive, to get legal advice? Is it Attorney General, or who do we turn to
I think that's for you as an individual MLA, because we took a decision at this committee when we heard from the head of legal services that we weren't going to publish the guidance. Okay, we've got two actions.
Yes.
Two combined actions. We're going to move on. Okay, so just the announcement of funding to address racial and social cohesion, just to welcome that. Yesterday we heard in the Chamber that the First Minister and Deputy First Minister have allocated 220,000 to the department. So I think if we could write to the department to ask for a breakdown of how that funding is to be distributed and targeted. Okay. Lastly, then, informal meeting with Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, just to advise that the Deputy Chair, Clark, and I met virtually with the Chief Executive and Chair of Fermanagh and Omagh Council yesterday. I think there has been an informal note has been circulated.
It will be.
Oh, sorry.
It will
okay.
be with members by the end of the week.
Okay, so just to move on then, draft minutes, you'll find these on pages 97 to 105 of your pack. Are people content that these are a true record?
Great.
Okay, thank you. So matters arising then. So just refer you to pages 170, 111 of your pack. So there's a clerk's brief for detailing matters in relation to the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. Just to remind that the committee agreed at its meeting on the 26th of March to write to all statutory committees seeking information on their respective roles in relation to the strategy, given it is identified as a key priority in the programme for government. Just to advise that the brief summarises the roles and actions taken by each department, including any funding bid for and or earmarked by each department for its activities relating to the strategy. Just to advise that the committee is due to receive a briefing from officials on the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategic framework and the first delivery plan after summer recess. So I'm just going to ask you to note the briefing paper at this stage and to write the department for the briefing, giving details of the responses received. I am concerned at topical questions yesterday. In year one of the action plan, it says that they're going to commission research into evidence gaps of men and boys' attitudes and behaviours related to violence against women and girls in year one. And the First Minister didn't indicate that research had been commissioned yet. Now, I know that all the ministers have a lot of information retained in their heads, but I would like to know if that hasn't been commissioned or the status of that, just to make sure that we heard right yesterday in the Chamber. Okay, so...
Could I just add another point?
Please go ahead.
It's just in relation to the cost of SIB.
Yes.
Before the summer recess, I'd like to know what they're doing in their final year, because it's nearly 900,000 that has been spent on SIB staff and groups within the community and voluntary sector, or even groups that have yet to be formed, are heavily scrutinised, and rightly so. But it's an unfair relationship, and it's also unfair and unequal in terms of funding. Even groups who have yet to get funding, like those that Timothy raised last week, are going to have to go through hoops, and yet and all we have a group within TEO who have received 900 grand and we know very little about it. So
no, thank you, noted. Okay, so we're moving.
Sure.
Go ahead, sorry Claire, I didn't see you.
Forgive me if this is not the right place to raise it, but just in relation to the violence against women and girls piece, can we get an update on what other departments are doing and how they're inputting into the strategy generally? I just given what had happened this week, it comes back to that upstream approach, so how are communities even funding opportunities or programmes to try and change the conversation around men and boys? What's education doing in terms of relationship and consent? Is that worth seeking an update generally as an overall strategy?
I think a lot of the correspondence we received this week, Claire, actually outlined that. There was a lot in the pack this week. So I think maybe if we could sort of find a way to summarise that, because
yes, the brief that you have from myself provides a summary of the spending that each department have made to date, any allocations or bids that they have made for the rest of this year on that, and there is then some detail on the actual actions that have taken. To be honest, some departments are doing a lot more than others, but that's to do with remit.
Yeah.
So that information is pretty much up to date, certainly within the last, I would say, month or so. So I think perhaps we could write again later in the year to get an update. I'm not sure we would get any more information now than we have done in the last number of weeks.
Okay.
Just write them all
Well,
every
end is
quarter.
one thing. I suppose it's more of outcomes, but maybe it's not fair to expect that at this stage.
Outcomes. The only thing I would say to that, Chair, is that obviously the relevant team from TEO who are coordinating that will be coming before the committee in the next session, and perhaps that's something that we can explore with them then.
Go ahead.
I suppose reiterating the concern I've raised before, in that TEO essentially isn't taking the approach or taking the ownership of this that I would like them to, whereas they're farming a lot of the work out to local councils. One of the things I wanted to raise today, so I have a meeting set up next week with the police and Chief Executive of the local council in Northampton. I'm looking at a response from the Department of Justice. Can we get buy-in? Obviously, Minister Long is very keen to always point out it's an operational manner or operational matter. Anytime we start talking about the PSNI, is it possible we could push that when we're talking about ending violence against women and girls, as DOJ, including the police, that we don't have to reach out to the Chief Constable for buy-in? Because there's a massive piece of this sits with the PSNI. And if the Minister continues to take the attitude of that's an operational matter.
Okay. There's the policy, there's the strategy, and then there's operational delivery. So maybe you could write to the Minister's private office and ask for that clarification.
Because that's one of the things what I've raised concerns about ahead of the meeting on Monday.
Okay, Timothy, I'm really conscious we've got 3 sessions to get through. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so members,
Just
very
one point of
quickly,
clarification
please.
to indicate. I just wanted. I didn't hear what you said earlier under Chair's business. You said about getting more detail about a fund. Was that the Connect Fund through the mentioned in the East West Council minutes? No.
I think, Chair, is that the 220,000 funding that was announced yesterday?
Right.
It's for social cohesion, race and social cohesion.
Could we also request information on the £1 million Connect Fund that was mentioned in the minutes of the East West Council?
Okay. No,
I think I haven't seen information on that going out.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. Okay, members, move on then. So just to go to our first oral briefing, just to refer you to pages 209 to 210 for the clerk's brief, 211 to 217 for the RAISE briefing paper. So I'm just going to welcome to the meeting Thomas Luff, who is the research officer with RAISE. He's been before us many times. You're very welcome back. Thank you for the work you've done and sent in advance. I think you're maybe going to do a presentation, are you?
Yes.
Of it? Good stuff. Thank you.
How do you say that? Here in New Zealand?
Oh, yeah.
Aotearoa.
How do you say it, Thomas?
Aotearoa.
Aotearoa.
Yeah. Right. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the rest of the committee for having me back. Nice to see you all again. You'll be glad to hear that this will probably be, at least from my end, fairly short, so you might get back on track time-wise. But I'm just going to go through the paper that's in your packs on designing consultations to help you with the work to launch your call for evidence on the Mother and Baby Magdalen Laundries and Workhouses bill. A quick note that the paper itself contains a case study from the Scottish Parliament. That was broadly taken from a recent paper on trauma-informed approaches, which my colleague Michael drafted a couple of weeks ago, and another colleague Annabelle briefed you on recently as well. So I'm not going to go into detail on that again because you've already seen that. But just to highlight that importance of a trauma-informed approach when you consider kind of calls for evidence and consultations, as well as the rest of your work through the scrutiny process. In the area around kind of the launching of and designing calls for evidence and consultations, specifically, there's not a huge amount of information publicly available on that. As you'll probably know, a lot of the time when calls for evidence are closed, it's not so easy to see all the information that was on it sometimes. So what I've done is I've put together some of the key themes that I picked up from a number of discussions with colleagues working in other jurisdictions. So I'd just briefly like to thank those who spoke to me from Scottish Parliament, Westminster, the Oireachtas and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, for their help with this research. There was some confidentiality in those discussions, so to respect that, I'm highlighting the key themes that were raised here, but I think there's some really interesting and hopefully helpful material in there, which hopefully kind of has also been reflected in some of the work on trauma-informed approaches that you've done already and heard from as well. So first of these key themes is in relation to the accessibility of the call for evidence documents. First up is the proactive provision of alternative formats. So really, contributors highlighted the importance of providing different versions of the committee's call for evidence without necessarily requiring individuals to specifically request them. Common formats were easy read formats and sign language formats as well as translations into minority languages, for example, Te Reo Māori, Gaelic and Scots, and various other languages as well. That then kind of feeds into the next part, which is accepting submissions in any language. So a lot of the jurisdictions made clear when they were asking for responses for the call for evidence that those responses could come in any language, including in sign language as well. So just making it as easy as possible for people to respond to those written that call for evidence. On that theme of the responses was the flexible response options. This is about tailoring submission formats to the audience. So often there were a couple of different options that committees and inquiries gave for written submissions. A formal version, which was usually designed for organisations and policy professionals. So that tended to be people with more technical expertise who might comment on specific clauses and maybe how that would work in practice. And then a more accessible, shorter version designed for individuals, including survivors and those with lived experience, to provide more general thoughts on the bill. Frequently, these were done in kind of survey format, often with kind of tick boxes or limited options to get a general sense of what would work for those people with a bill. Less room for a more for kind of the open text, and that was really to give a more kind of focused response for those scrutiny points rather than maybe more general points that might not necessarily be relevant for the bill. But obviously that some space for those open texts as well. And then once those submissions are received, it's of course essential to be aware of the ethical handling of those. For the kind of initial launch of a call for evidence, where that would be important is making it clear to people how their submissions will be handled, so that they can trust the process. Essentially, that I suppose trust is one of the themes that you'll see kind of through this whole thing. Often it was found that helped victims and survivors understand perhaps where it would be necessary to redact any of their submissions. So that might be when maybe they mentioned a sibling or somebody else they knew who was in an institution and their information couldn't be shared without consent. So rather than somebody seeing that their submission was published, redacted, and not understanding why, just making that clear from the outset what might happen with the submission that they gave. Next we have probably kind of the largest area, which is around the clarity of purpose and process, which I'm sure you've kind of already discussed. Part of that is explaining the committee's role. This was seen as a particularly important part during this. You all understand what a committee's role is. I understand what a committee's role is, but most people probably don't really understand what that is. And obviously the committee's role changes depending on what work it is you're doing. So for this kind of work, for this scrutiny of legislation, it's really important to make sure that people understand that's what the committee is doing. It's scrutinising the legislation, rather than being a space to necessarily hear oral testimony or to provide any emotional support and guidance. There are avenues for that may be what an inquiry will do down the line, and there's support organisations for that kind of more support. Now, that isn't to say that the committee won't hear that or doesn't want to hear that, but it's making it clear that exactly what the committee is there to do. And that helps to manage expectations of those people who either write in or speak to you orally, prevents potential re-traumatisation, and ensures evidence is used appropriately for scrutiny purposes. So somebody doesn't come or writes them and doesn't respond to the call for evidence with a huge piece on their personal experience and then sees that that isn't used for anything, because that's not the committee's role. So it's just making it really clear what the role of the committee is. Feeding into that is being clear about what the committee can and cannot do. So being upfront about the remit, and that helps build trust and ensure those who are engaging with the process understand the boundaries of the process as well. Again, explaining, as well as the committee's role, what the legislative process is, so that people understand what the next steps will be, what happens through the committee process, but then what happens next with all the information that you've gathered and then further down the line. It was a lot of discussions touched on videos and how they were quite helpful for explaining the legislative process, something that can be quite complicated, even for those of us that are kind of part of it. It can be quite complex, so just making sure people really understand in the simplest way what that is. And then identifying who the committee are. So that's partly identifying and making it clear who you all are and what your roles are in the committee. But also, a lot of people highlighted the importance of explaining that the committee is not the government and the differences between the two. And just being aware of what kind of contact people may have come into with the state before, with state institutions, and that those might have been quite negative, particularly in the area that this bill is touching on. But it could be any number of things. It could be the justice system, it could be the welfare system, it could be anything. Those might be quite negative. So just to build that trust with what the committee is here to do and to help the process. And then finally, that's support and communication. So again, in most of these discussions, most of the committees or inquiries, when they were doing their work, just made sure that on the web pages, be that the Call for Evidence web page or the committee's own, just making sure that those support services were well signposted in all of that material. And anything else that the committee makes public. I guess you can't do that too many times, essentially, was the general theme. And then providing information through different channels for that communication. So most committee information and inquiry information was disseminated through digital channels in a written form, which is obviously really important. But a lot of contributors highlighted that other options should be made available and considered. So for example, sign language interpreters, posting videos, as we mentioned before, and sending information by post if that's more appropriate for someone. I know that you guys as a committee and the clerk and the team have already been considering a lot of these things, so I'm not expecting this to be kind of groundbreaking and anything new, but really it's just some really important areas that other jurisdictions had kind of used before and come across or seen as being really important. On that, I'm happy to answer any questions if I can around that, but yeah, otherwise hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. So we're going to have a closed session shortly around sort of what we're going to do. So some of this might overlap into that. But I'm really picking up around the flexibility around submissions, and obviously we've got Citizen Space Portal here, so that's something I'm very conscious of. But maybe just in terms of your own research. So I would term the sort of collective of birth mothers and adult adoptees. And then there's also, like, some would call them like victims and survivors of the institutions. And I'm just wondering, did you come across like the collective noun, without being offensive to people? And because not everybody feels like a victim. So I'm conscious of that sort of us almost saying patronising.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy answer to that is that there's no easy answer, in that what might work in one jurisdiction that maybe a lot of people had agreed on, for example, just victims and survivors, or victims/survivors, or just survivors, or something completely different, works there. And there's nothing that will, obviously, you're talking about a diverse and large group of people. There'll be some people who will like a term and who won't, will find it difficult. So there isn't an easy answer, and there's no answer that will kind of that everybody will feel comfortable with. So it's just kind of just trying to do your best to find what's most comfortable. And then, you know, in New Zealand they had other concerns because a lot of the issues were with a lot of the kind of inquiry concerns were around Maori or Pacifica people, so there were different terms to make sure that they kept that inclusive for them as well. So there's a lot to think about, but I think the answer is, so long as you're thinking about it and being thoughtful in it, then that's the most important thing. But there is no right answer that will be the kind of the utopia for everybody that everyone will be comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. And a second one from me. It's in relation to how we're all online all the time, and again we've got our sort of plan that we'll talk about. But I'm very conscious that we want as many voices, and obviously there's the consultative forum. They've got their own database, but you know, to make this really meaningful, we need to go beyond. So was there any like innovative ways that you discovered that other jurisdictions introduced to sort of really try to, you know, get into communities that maybe just aren't networked in with the existing?
I don't think there was anything maybe kind of groundbreaking necessarily. It was ensuring that there was that flexibility, like you mentioned as well, and I suppose thinking a little bit outside the box in terms of who you might reach out to as a committee or, you know, as individuals, and not just thinking, well, these people have engaged before, so we'll go to them, which obviously you should, but just trying to be a bit more thoughtful about, well, there's people who won't have engaged with the process, why? And some of that will be about like simplifying that language, making it easier for people to understand, because something that yourselves as a committee or another committee might have put out before to try and get interest, somebody might read and go, I don't understand what these words mean because I'm not, you know, embedded in that area, or not a specialist, or not part of a wider group, so it's probably not for me. So I think it's just that flexibility of saying, look, you respond in the way that you feel works best for you, and in, you know, it's not too prescriptive, whilst understanding that you do have a scrutiny role to play, and that plays into it. So I suppose it's the flexibility that really came across from a lot of places within the bounds of what's possible. I mean, there's only a level of flexibility you can.
I think that speaks to my concern around it being called the Truth Recovery Public Inquiry. I think that all of a sudden people say, oh, that's nothing to do with me, that's to do with the Troubles and stuff. So I totally agree around the plain language. Anybody else got any questions? Go ahead, please, Brian.
Thank you, Thomas, for the paper and presentation. I mean, just looking at the bill, it just uses the terms relevant persons throughout, you know, and talks about the relevant institutions. But I suppose I would just refer to people who spend time in one of these institutions where many experienced harm, you know. I think the point's been made about we have a familiarisation event on Monday, and we don't want people to think that is the inquiry, you know, as you said, and but equally both, well, either maybe not so much for yourself or ourselves, will the information at that event, will that be passed on to the department as well? I mean, they are to produce terms of reference for the inquiry.
That's a very long line.
There's no sign of that at the moment.
No.
But I think we should be capturing, you know, what is said on Monday. I mean, those coming on Monday are people who, in due course, will hopefully be coming to committee. Is that correct? That's the idea.
Hopefully the people who come on Monday will, in the first instance, respond through the citizens portal, and then whenever we get at the end of the consultation, then we'll pull that together and then decide who we will invite.
Right.
If that makes sense. So.
Yeah. You know, it's important that we do make it clear that our role is to make the bill, the legislation as fit for purpose and as good as it can be. But it's not the inquiry itself.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, like you say, Brian, one of the really important things that came out was just making it really clear to people, this is what we're here for, and it's not because your personal testimony isn't important, it's not because we don't want to hear it because, you know, we're not bothered. It's just saying out, look, this isn't the forum for it necessarily. Yeah. This forum is for scrutinising the bill. What that means, because scrutinising legislation doesn't really mean anything necessarily to, your normal person on the street. So it's explaining exactly what that means and exactly what your role as a committee is in that process, so that people, when they come, go, this is what they want to hear, and this is a point I want to make about the bill, and I will save my personal testimony if I want to give it for the appropriate place, be that the inquiry or something else. So yeah, that's certainly something that came across quite strongly, was the importance of being really clear about what the committee will do and what it's not there to do.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments or questions for Thomas?
Well, thank you, Thomas.
No, thank you. Another excellent report. I really appreciate your effort. Okay, members, thank you. Just moving on to the next item then. I misspoke. It's not in closed session. It's going to be recorded by Hansard. I don't know. I misread that earlier. So yes, so we're going to move on now, and we're going to look at the stakeholder list and consultation material. So members, you'll find the clerk's brief on pages 262 to 264, the committee timetable on 265 to 266, the draft engagement and communications plan on pages 267 to 270, the draft press release on 271, Ray's briefing paper on suggested stakeholders on 273 to 279, and in the table pack, pages 3 to 8, you'll find the draft consultation questions. Okay, so I am going to ask, so just to advise that this is our last meeting for summer recess, and the committee need to agree its consultation material and stakeholder list in relation to the inquiry and redress scheme bill. And so I'm going to ask the clerk to speak to the suggested items for agreement. Thank you, clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, page 262 of the pack is the briefing paper that runs through what the committee have done to date, and then also what needs to happen before we actually get to our scrutiny process for the actual bill. So if you'll bear with me, I'll just run through a few of those things, and that will then take us into the other items of the pack. So just to remind members, the bill formally commenced on Wednesday the 25th of June, and the committee agreed a couple of meetings ago on the 11th of June that the committee stage of the bill will be extended to the 30th of January 2026. That leads me on to the timetable for the committee from now until then, which you will find on page 265 of your pack. I don't intend to go through everything week by week, but just really to highlight some of the areas in that. So as members have already mentioned, we are holding 3 familiarisation sessions for the committee on this bill. The first one of those is next Monday in the Long Gallery from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. And Chair, if you don't mind, I would encourage members to come to that if they can. I think it would be helpful if we had as many members as possible there for that. We've already previously, as a committee team, have given you the agenda for that. But just very briefly, as Thomas was saying in the last session, this session is more about getting people an understanding of what it is that the committee do and what we're going to be doing during our part of the bill process. It isn't really to discuss the policy of the bill. That will come after the consultation and during the evidence sessions. So we're going to spend quite a lot of time on Monday explaining to people that what the committee is, what we actually do, what our statutory responsibilities are in terms of scrutinising legislation, who the members of the committee are. Outreach team will then talk about the difference between the Assembly, its committees and the government, which again Thomas had pointed out was very important, because a lot of people, I think, don't necessarily understand that relationship and see the Assembly as being the government. So we'll talk about that. The bill clerk for this bill is also coming to that session and will give just a general overview of how a bill works and what the different stages of that mean. I'll then talk in a bit more detail about the committee stage and what it is that the consultation will do, and then what the committee is seeking to do for the bill. We'll have perhaps some questions and answers with those that are present after that. And then the other thing that we're doing is actually going to be showing the people who come that day what the committee room looks like. And members will recall that we're not doing it in this room. We're doing it in room 21 because we feel it's just slightly less formal and perhaps, for want of a better phrase, less intimidating than this room is. So we'll be bringing those that are present on Monday to actually have a look at the room. We've done a couple of videos about how they get to the building, what happens when they get inside the building. We also have a breakout room which will be available for people who are coming to give evidence. We'll show them that. And we'll then get back upstairs. I think we'll do that in 2 groups because there are quite a number of people coming to this. It'll also give us the opportunity, by then the consultation will be live on Citizen Space, so we'll be able to show people how to get to that and how it looks so that they can start to see how they would respond to it. And then some closing remarks, and hopefully it'll give people quite a lot of detail about what it is that the committee are actually here to do. And I think we've just heard actually in the last briefing that that's quite important for us as a committee. So,
sorry, just before you move on.
Yes.
So in terms of the breakout room, like today, we're about 20 minutes behind schedule. So is the breakout room going to be available? So not just for if they're feeling a wee bit overwhelmed, but just generally in terms of waiting.
yes, and we will have, Chair, a screen in the breakout room which will be showing the committee proceedings, so
they can
people
keep
will
track,
be able to keep track. And obviously we will have representatives both in that room and obviously in room 21, so we'll be keeping communication lines going about that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
So we're also holding 2 more sessions which will happen after summer recess. One of those will be, again, for people who perhaps didn't want to come to this building. One is going to be at the Wave Trauma Centre at Belfast on the 9th of September. And then for people who can't make it physically, we're going to be doing an online session as well on the 11th of September. But we'll come back to members with more details of those when we are a bit further into summer recess. So just moving on in terms of the timetable then, our first meeting back for the committee is Wednesday the 10th of September. And at that meeting, we will hopefully have analysis of some of the results from the call for evidence. The call for evidence remains open until the end of September, so it won't be a complete picture at that stage, but it may well be that we can provide quite a lot of that. We will have an oral briefing session by Assembly Research on their actual bill paper, so they'll go into a lot more detail about that. And the examiner strategy rules will be briefing us on legal and delegated powers. Just to say for members not relating to the bill, we will also have FM, DFM and the junior ministers at that meeting as well. And I can clarify again, just from a query from last week, FM, DFM and junior ministers are scheduled to meet us again at the end of the session, so we will have a further meeting with them in December. So if members just look at page, where are we, 266, which is the second part of the timetable, we then have evidence sessions that stretch basically all the way through to Halloween, and we will, I hope, do between 2 or 3 evidence sessions per week, which will allow us to get through perhaps 9 or 12 different sets of groups or bodies that can come to those evidence sessions. We're also looking at the possibility of doing a round table event, which I think will be an ideal opportunity for more individuals to meet us. We're also planning on doing that not in the building, going somewhere else to do that. Again, we have to wait and see a little bit to see what responses we get back in terms of the consultation, to then see how many individuals have responded and how we could then invite them to that. But we are planning to do that event. We have Halloween recess, we then have a visit, and then we really get into the deliberation of the bill. There would be the opportunity for a final evidence session after Halloween if we needed it, if we felt that there was more that we needed to do. So that's either going to be 6 or 7 main evidence sessions, then deliberations with ourselves and the bill team and also the department, then informal clause by clause, and then formal clause by clause, which will probably get us to Christmas. And then after Christmas, we really need to be into the final stages of it. So we'd be looking at a draft report and then actually an agreement of report, and then sign off by Friday the 30th. That isn't a target of us not doing it before then, but that's the absolute last time that we can do it. So I don't know if members, Chair, have any questions around the timetable.
So hopefully it'll not take us till the 30th of January for committee stage to end. But once we get that report signed off, how quickly will we be able to bring then consideration stage to the Chamber? Well,
Chair, it's up to the department when they bring us their bill. So it's up to them when they bring consideration stage. Obviously, once our report has been published, the onus will turn to them to actually move to consideration stage. So I can't give a definitive timeline on that.
Generally, would it be a couple of weeks?
I think it depends on whether the report provides for potentially lots of recommendations.
Okay.
But again, we'll have maybe a better understanding of that as we go through the process. And obviously, we'll be liaising with the department,
Yeah.
on a weekly basis.
So just on that then, so obviously it would be preferable if, for example, the amendment on the posthumous date, for example, that the department themselves looked at that. So how are we going to formally engage? I know you said there you'll be speaking informally, but how do we as a committee, how will we engage with the department throughout that sort of 2-month period of scrutiny and then deliberation?
I think, again, to a certain extent, it's for the department to decide how much they want to get involved in that, but certainly all of our sessions, the majority of our sessions will be in open session, and often departmental officials tend to come and we'll listen to that, and we'll start to get a view on the evidence that is coming forward. During the latter stages, when we have our deliberations, again, the bill clerk will be liaising very closely with the departmental team,
Okay.
and we will be having the bill clerk with us as well. So it will be an ongoing process.
Okay.
Certainly, we'll make sure that the department are fully aware of where the
I'm sure-
committee are
yeah.
heading.
Go ahead, please, Carol.
So can we send all that to the department so they definitely will know?
In terms of the timescales,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because it is important that they bring forward draft amendments, because the committee were quite clear on that.
Yes.
And then the other questions are, say in terms of the potential calls for evidence, has the NIO been added to that list?
It isn't on the stakeholder list, but it is for the committee to decide that list. So again, we could certainly add that on.
I don't think we've got there yet.
No, we'll
Yeah.
come to
We'll
that
come
in
to that
a
wee
minute when we
Because
come
I
to
have
the
a few
list. But
suggestions as well.
noted for
Yeah.
now.
Stuart, have you any questions in relation to where we are so far? Timetable, please.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and
Okay.
apologies for quality of sound. My only question is in respect of both the information session and the evidence gathering. If there's sufficient numbers, or indeed even small numbers, can we just factor in that we might need to go out of Parliament buildings to perhaps Derry, Londonderry, and Enniskillen, make people have to travel and add to their anxiety?
Yeah, I think that the clerk had mentioned there, Stuart, that potentially a stakeholder event will be somewhere else, but I think the sort of northwest would probably be the most reasonable in terms of
Yes.
travel time. But no, thank you.
Or Newry, given
Or Newry, of course.
Marionville.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah,
right.
sorry.
Go ahead, please, Harry.
Just when you mentioned moving to room 21 and the breakout room, how close is it?
So that is room 54,
So
which is and it is
It's opposite, is it?
Yeah, it's round the corner and down. It's sort of at the back end of the Senate. We've picked that room because it's out of the way.
Yeah.
So people will not have to. This is quite a busy corridor, and you have 3 committees running and people sitting outside. People will be able to go from the breakout room 54 round to room 21 and really not come across anybody else. And so we're trying to make it as quiet and as sensitive as possible for people going from that room to the committee room. So that's why we've picked it. But again, on Monday, we will show yourselves as well as everybody else how that's actually going to work.
Great, thank you.
That's fine.
Do you want to continue?
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks, Chair. And needless, the one thing I will mention, just in terms of going outside of the building, again, if it's clear from the consultation responses that there is a significant number from a particular geographical area, then obviously there is flexibility for us to do that if we need to. Difficult to give that till we've got our responses back in, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So just moving on there, Chair, page 267 is the engagement and communications plan. And again, there's quite a lot in this. Needless to say, quite a lot of it ties in again with what Thomas was telling the committee in the last session in terms of how the committee are trying to get out to as many people as possible to make them aware of this process, just aware of the bill, firstly, but then aware of the call for evidence and the committee's scrutiny of that bill. So community and community outreach within the Assembly have a fairly extensive mailing list of third sector bodies, and we will be going out to all of those contacts. We will also be looking to advertise in libraries and all GP surgeries, and hopefully that's again another way of actually perhaps getting to people that wouldn't necessarily have been reached before. The committee, the comms team in the Assembly are also looking to be advertising within the wider UK, ROI, the US, Canada and Australia, and we will be doing paid advertising in all of those countries again to try and reach people outside of here who don't necessarily know about the bill. Obviously a huge amount of online content. We will be, during the evidence process, week by week, I think we had talked about this previously in a previous session, we'll be doing videos giving updates of where we are, who we've heard from, the type of evidence we've had. Those will be going up online on our website. We'll use the committee website as a bit of a hub for the actual bill, and we'll be pointing people via social media to the committee website. There will be a letter going in to editors in newspapers, both locally and nationally, from the Chair and Deputy Chair at the beginning of September, when we're actually back and visible again. We'll also be using our YouTube channel to promote, again, videos that have been made and will be made throughout the process, throughout the evidence stage. Plenary material raising awareness of the coming inquiry. I think at that point we'll also get interviews for Chair and perhaps Deputy Chair, radio and TV coverage in early September when we've actually started our evidence. Again, a big push then. We'll still have a month of the consultation period at that, but we'll have actually been physically starting our evidence then. Also contacting constituency officers and party groups, trying to we'll be providing posters and graphics that can perhaps go up in constituency offices again, or if there are mailing lists that constituency officers has, getting that information out there. And then also liaison with the department as to see what they can do to actually try and up the people who know about the bill. I've talked about the familiarisation sessions, familiarisation videos, guide to witnesses. We will have an easy read written document giving more of an understanding of what witnesses are here for and what the committee will be looking for them. We're also going to be providing videos on that. Again, something else that we talked about during the trauma-informed training was perhaps having videos of members encouraging witnesses and offering support and guidance. And again, we'll get those ready for September, and they will be on the website as well. So you'll see there's a pretty detailed and informed communication and outreach plan for this.
Okay, so sorry, Harry, just a couple of questions from me. So there's a committee email address there for that if people want to get their own printed copy posted out, that which is good.
Yes.
Is that exclusionary? Like, should there not be a phone number for people if they?
So the press release that we're going to come to has our address for the committee team, has a phone number, has the email address.
Okay.
So that will go out in the next few days.
So in terms of, it says here the ads, for example, any adverts need to include the link to survey, link to committee. Okay, so that's clear then. So you don't have to just request it via email. Okay. I am concerned, and I've raised this with you and the assistant clerk, around the fact that the Citizen Space portal is the only show in town, really. I just think that it's, as Thomas had indicated there, there's people maybe have other disabilities or difficulties, and I just think it's maybe just too exclusive. Is there any way that we can move around that?
There is the email address, and if members of the public or anybody decides to provide their views on the bill via the email address, something that I think what we should perhaps do is wait and see what happens over the course of the consultation. If we find that actually we get quite a number of responses not through Citizen Space, then I think that's something that perhaps we can come back to a committee, perhaps at our first meeting, and then have a look at other options that we have there. We're certainly not going to, if somebody emails in, the committee team will point them to Citizen Space, but it's not as if we're then just going to ignore the email that they have.
And last one, in terms of the constituency office, I think you set out posters and stuff.
Yeah, graphics certainly.
It would be useful if they, when are we getting those? That would be useful to get those before summer recess, or at the time that the consultations launched and the call for evidence.
At the minute it would be following the call for evidence launch, so that will be in July. I'll check the date on that, but it'll certainly be within the next close period of times.
Okay, any other thoughts at this stage on this? Go ahead please, Brian.
Just you might have said it, Mick, in the paid for advertising, I presume ROI will be included in that. Okay.
Harry, sorry, you were going to come in earlier.
That's fine, sure. No, I was just thinking there's a lot of money obviously being spent there and all the advertising. I was just wondering, was it ever a thought leaflet drop every house? Or?
Chair, at this stage, we hadn't put that in, and again, we do have a defined budget that we can use for this bill. I think the comms and engagement team, whose advice we take on a lot of this, felt that we could reach a lot more people outside of the local area using advertising, and also all of our social media is free. And that can be quite targeted. I don't really understand the ins and outs of that, but that's something that they can do. I think we had looked at things like GP surgeries and libraries and other public environments where people will be, but I don't think we'd actually discussed a targeted leaflet drop. It's certainly something that, Chair, we can take back to comms. We may have an issue with budget on that, but certainly we'll bring it back.
Thank you.
No, I get you that. It'd be a big expanse, whereas you can do a lot more maybe with,
other forms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Just on the social media, if we thought of trying to get somebody, I'm not saying like an ambassador, that's not the right thing, but for somebody to really help us push this message on social media, like TikTok, other people doing, videos about it, things like that. Sometimes when it comes from a political narrative or from a government body, people just tune out. Whereas if we're given any thought to influencers helping with some of this?
Again, I would defer to my comms colleagues on that. It's not something that we have discussed with them. This is a plan that can be amended, certainly. This is more about really the framework for us. It's something that myself and the assistant clerk can take back to comms and ask about that. I'll be honest, outside of members of the committee, that's not something that we had looked at, but certainly we'll take that back. I have to defer to them a little bit on that. They're the guys with the know-how, but we'll take that back to them.
Okay, the press statement then.
Yes. So page 271 is the draft press release that basically. Again, launches the committee beginning its work on the scrutinising of the bill, and members have a copy of that there. And within that press release, there are further. It talks about the familiarisation sessions that we're holding, not just the one on Monday, but also the two in September. How people can make their submissions. The email address that we have. I wonder if it might be worth putting
that's sort of what was pointed earlier.
Okay. We can do that and put a physical address as well.
But I think you need to specify that a hard or like a copy of the the call for evidence form can be emailed out. I think that needs to be clarified.
That's fine. We can definitely put that in. That's not a problem. I just wonder if members have any comment on the press release. It's relatively standard, to be honest.
Really standard. I would also, you did mention, or Thomas mentioned sign language, even just consulting with with Braille. I can't remember the name of the largest charity.
Off the top of my head, I don't know, to be honest. But again, I can speak to colleagues in communities who are currently going through a consultation on the sign language bill.
Yeah, they are.
So I can speak to them and see if there's any further routes that we can use for that. Certainly.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Okay, next.
And then finally, after the press release, there's the page 273 is the stakeholder list that has come through from RAISE, and obviously this is their suggested list of different types of stakeholders that the committee could contact in terms of inviting them to provide a response to the consultation. It also provides the committee with the startings of a list of who they may wish to start to invite to the evidence sessions when we get to September. There are a couple of institutions or names that I just wanted to highlight to members that personally I'm not sure are as relevant, and that would be that within 1.2 public bodies, the Commissioner for Survivors of Institutional Childhood Abuse, that is very much an HIA organisation. There's nothing to stop them consulting anyway, but I'm not sure that they're necessarily relevant.
The only thing I would say is that whenever they put the leaflet out, I think that they said that a lot of people came forward, non-recent child, and so I think that they maybe, they probably have.
I mean, if any organised Advice NI, Independent Advice Network, there's consultees, that's fine. But everybody that's there, I mean, the reason I asked about this earlier, I do think in terms of NIO before devolution, we need to have representatives there. And I mean, it may be down in terms of organisations, and even the PSNI report mentioned organisations that we weren't familiar with.
Well, I'd actually made a note that I think there may be omissions in 1.4, religious and charitable bodies. Again, and I would ask if the committee would bear with us there. We'll go back and see what else we can identify on that, because I think, as you say, there are a couple of perhaps actual institutions that we weren't aware of.
There's a couple more. So you've got Savia, you've got the Rosetta Trust, you haven't got the North West Survivors Forum, nor the Survivors Together.
Yeah.
And then I think in terms of the legal representation, Phoenix Law. Thought they were missing. So.
Phoenix Law are representing a lot of the people, and
anybody else got any other suggestions of who they think could be included on this list?
in terms of the Bureau in Washington.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Diaspora.
You know, so the Bureau in Washington, the Bureau in Brussels even,
Yeah.
just to you, because they're already established international groups.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would do that in terms of international community support. And even the consulates, the British and Irish consulates, I would put in.
Yeah. Good ideas. Yeah. Anybody else got any ideas?
Chair, I would also say to members that if ideas arrive,
Yes.
certainly feel free to email, and we can add those to the list. It doesn't have to be. We can agree this list with those additions now, but again via correspondence, if there are other institutions, we can certainly agree those in the future.
I wonder if you could go to the consultation forum and ask them if they have any other suggestions.
Yeah,
Marie,
definitely.
Yeah, they, or even the TO directorate that's overseeing this. Maybe I've already done that. Have you?
Yes.
And
Okay,
see in terms of the Irish government, it would be the scheme that they had, even just to compare and contrast some religious bodies, because like the PSNI, we would identify ones that we weren't aware of, and many of these are all island in nature, but it would be helpful just to see if there are others out there.
Okay, so members, thank you for all of that. Is that everything?
There's one more. We just need
sorry,
the
go ahead.
and perhaps the most important one is the consultation questions.
Oh yes, sorry.
And so members will find that in the table pack, pages 3 to 8. Just to give members a an understanding of how the consultation process works in terms of citizen space. Citizen space will allow, we will provide a text box for every clause of the bill, so of which there are over 60. So there will be the opportunity for anybody to provide any response to any part of the bill, any clause. We will also provide what we call a free text box, which we will limit to a certain extent, because again, as Thomas was saying earlier on, I think we need to try and keep that succinct if we can. Pardon? No, just the free text box at the beginning saying outside of the clauses any other thoughts. But for the clauses, yes, there will be a box for each one that respondees can go to. However, we've also picked out questions that we thought were relevant to particular clauses throughout the three parts of the bill, most of which fall within part one, which is around the inquiry, and then part two, which is around the redress. And the other thing that we've tried to do is actually try and lighten some of the language around the clauses. Yes. So in terms of the actual questions, we've explained particular terms in perhaps slightly broader language, or the way that we framed the question is to try and loosen the sort of the legalese of some of the clauses.
I just make a point. See, Bram may be able to say, but see, the terminal illness payment, it's death reasonably expected within 6 months rather than 12. I think.
I think.
DFC.
I think it's a DFC.
Have a look on the bill for that. But it's okay.
What clause is it?
That is
it's clause 34.
34, yeah.
I think.
Because it says 12 months in 34 too.
I think it's 6 months.
Yeah.
That was 12.
Is it 12?
12 in the bill, yeah.
No, it's 12 in the bill, but I think the DFC definition is 6 months.
Yes.
The terminal illness payment
Yeah.
is within, I'm nearly sure, 6 months.
Right, because I actually had a question to Gordon a few weeks ago to clarify that.
I suppose that the clause is really about giving priority to people who are
I know, but if one section of our government says you can receive a payment, a terminally ill payment, if you're not going to live past 6 months, then I think it would be a mistake not to have it in this bill.
Okay.
And I know it's not us; it's the department who brought it forward. But particularly if we're giving this out for questions. And it's not right. Well, sorry, it's not that it's not right.
It's not consistent.
It's not consistent, then that's an issue for us.
Okay, I think we just have to go back to the department. At the end of the day, the bill is as published.
And
So I think we have to reflect the bill as published, but there's nothing to stop people, obviously, we have a question on that particular clause reflecting within that, but it's something we can note for now and bring back when we actually get to the consultancy.
So the way these are obviously just the questions. In the actual survey, you'll actually provide the wording of the clause.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay.
So each clause will have the wording and then a box.
Okay.
But for certain clauses, we will also then have a question to point people perhaps to those clauses. So sorry, go ahead.
No, just clarifying.
Yeah, yes, there will be, each clause will be there, and respondees can look at them. So, Chair, it was just really to get members' views on those particular questions, on whether members think those questions are on the right clauses. As I say, this isn't set in stone, but we do need to agree them today, because it has to be uploaded in the next couple of days. So just to get members' views.
No, I'm content with them. I suppose the only question was, do you remember there was a time we were thinking about maybe doing 2 consultations, one for organisations and one for individuals? Is this just going to be one?
Yes, it is. However, I think the organisations perhaps will look at more the clause by clause version of it.
That's okay.
So the ones that we haven't asked specific questions to are really the more technical aspects of it. They they can respond to those.
That's okay.
Sorry, I just googled it. It is 12 months, but you can get you can get a quicker payment if you have a GP saying you're not expected to live longer than 6 months.
Well, it's something we'll note.
Well, we'll keep it 12 then. That brings more people into it.
Yeah,
And-
but
and-
we could add something into
Yes, yeah.
Or 6 months even. Higher
and process
priority.
it. There is something in there about quicker payments,
Yes.
38 and 34.
Yeah.
Chair, just a minor point, just on that clause 34. I think there's extra words there on page 8 on the draft question. Just the bill gives priority. Then says be given, which I don't think is needed.
Oh, yes.
Just gives priority to applications.
Good spot. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, that's great.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions or comments?
No.
No? Okay. So,
Sorry, see the... No, that's it. I mean, see the stuff under right to appeal? That's in 38. So it said something in the explanatory note that it was like 30 days from the appeal was lodged.
it's just here, Carol.
30 days of
Yeah.
the person
Yeah.
being notified of a decision.
Yeah.
Yes, notified of the
38
decision.
Mhm.
So I'm not being pedantic. Is that 30 calendar days? Or, you know,
Yeah.
what way is that?
30 working days or...
No.
No, if it was working days, it would say, I think, working days, so...
Yeah. There's probably.
But it says here at the end, sorry, that the service may extend the deadline in exceptional circumstances. Can we just put that in as well? Just so people know. Because exceptional circumstances really do need to be exceptional.
Yeah.
Well,
They need to be defined.
the clause will be listed
There, okay.
with the box underneath.
No, sorry,
And the
you're
question.
right.
No, so yes, respondents will see that.
Go ahead, please, Brian.
At the very last question there, after that right of appeal, do you have any suggestions for methods of redress other than a financial payment, memorial, official apologies, other symbolic actions? Are there any support services proposed within the bill which happened under HIA, or just if it's
I
not?
think in some ways they're already existing in terms of WAVE and stuff, and Adopt NI and
Yes.
VSS stuff. Because under HIA they were recommendations and then they were set up, but these are already set up.
The advisory panel for the inquiry and then the redress panel, when we get to that point, I think would have capacity to look at that further. There isn't anything on the face of the bill in terms of requiring a organisation to be set up or a service to be set up, because
the
as
services are
Chair was saying,
already
they're
there.
It's already done.
Yeah.
Is that available to?
Yeah.
It was not just for people under the HIA criteria.
Remember when WAVE came here and they said they were setting up their own building, and then I think our familiarisation in September is going to see it. So
Right.
yeah, they're already accessing it. Now,
Okay.
it's not to say it's enough, maybe they'd say we'll need more as a result of this, but the minute there is something there.
Mothers who give birth, they would be given priority access to whatever, whether
Well,
it's
they have their own
counselling or
specific
support
service. Yeah.
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 Okay.
So if we could just seek agreement on all of that.
Okay, so can we
Yes.
seek agreement on all
Yeah.
of that? Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to end this session and thank Cansard for taking the note. Members, we'll take 5 minutes as comfort break, and then we'll come back. We'll have our session with the Northern Ireland Youth Assembly. Yep, it's okay.
Sure, I need to be away for 5 and getting a lift.
Oh God, no, I know.
Committee Room 30. Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 sound.
Okay, members, we're back after our break. Thank you. So we're moving on to our third oral briefing today. So this is with the Northern Ireland Assembly Youth Assembly in terms of the findings from a survey on young women's rights in schools. So I'm going to refer you to pages 281 to 283 of the pack for the clerk's brief and pages 281 to 356 of the pack for the NI Youth Assembly's Rights and Equality Committee report on young women's rights in schools. So welcoming to the meeting we've got Caleb Hasley, Dara Kerr, Ellie Clark, James McGinn and Nadia Matskevich. Thank you, apologies. So thank you for providing us information in advance. I'm wondering, Dara, are you going to provide some opening remarks or are you all going to say something?
We're all going to say a few things.
Okay, well, who would like to start then? Okay, go ahead, James, thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is James. Over the past 18 months, we focused on the priorities of young people and the changes needed to improve young women's rights in schools. This aligns with the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, Outcome 1, Changing Attitudes, Behaviour and Culture. On the 27th of June, we met with Junior Minister Riley. We were thankful to her for her time, and she said she would share her report with executive colleagues. We will of course share a report and recommendations with the Education Minister and look forward to meeting with him in the future. Let me give you some background on our work now. At the start of our mandate, we launched the Big Youth Survey, engaging with nearly 1,800 young people aged 11 to 21 across Northern Ireland. In February, we identified the top 10 issues and formed 3 committees: education, health and rights and equality. In May 2024, we began exploring attitudes, stereotypes and school culture impacting young women, supporting the Executive Office's strategy. We began by reviewing the Secondary Schools Union 2022 report on sexism and sexual harassment, which exposed widespread issues and recommended reforms including updated RSE, mandatory staff training, stronger reporting and regular data collection. We also examined the Gillen Review on how the justice system handles sexual offences. We also explored international standards like CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which requires eliminating discrimination and ensuring women's full participation in education and employment. In August 2024, we hosted a Stakeholder Day at Parliament Buildings, hearing from officials from NICI, officials from the Office of the Commissioner for Children and Young People, Assembly researchers, education officials and student advocate Rebecca Potter. NICI highlighted the state's duty under the UNCRC, the importance of pupil voice, access to information and school accountability, especially regarding inconsistent uniform policies. Researchers discussed targeted cultural change using Scotland as a model. Rebecca Potter shared her group's work challenging sexism in school and urged others to take action. Claire Archbold, EVOG Director, explained how everyday harmful behaviours drive serious violence and encourage youth-led challenges to toxic norms. Additional meetings included Jimmy Plant from the Education Authority on youth participation in the EVOG strategy and teacher John McCloskey, who presented the Female Voices Project using feminist theory and student research to tackle sexism and drive systemic change in schools.
Afternoon, my name's Ellie and I'd like to tell you about the Young People's Survey. In January and February of 2025, we ran a survey via Citizen Space, promoted through youth organisations and schools across Northern Ireland. We received 1,137 responses from young people aged 11 to 18, covering topics like sexism, uniforms, period dignity, safety and PE. About 65% of those who responded attended co-ed schools, 35% of respondents attended single-sex schools, with most respondents being female. 771 of them to be exact. These responses shaped our understanding of young people's experiences. Over 77% of girls reported experiencing sexism at school, and 73% said that girls feel unsafe in school. Pupils described sexual harassment and degrading jokes, often dismissed as banter. Harmful attitudes were influenced by figures such as Andrew Tate and phrases such as "go back to the kitchen." Uniform policies were a major concern. Girls reported facing stricter rules, especially about skirt length and inappropriate teacher behaviour, like a male teacher looking under tables to check skirt lengths. These experiences damaged girls' mental health, with reports often being ignored and with few consequences. Gender inequality is widespread. Nearly half of young people had heard locker room talk, and over half saw gender-based teacher favouritism. Boys seemed to receive more encouragement in STEM subjects and PE, while girls reported facing stricter discipline and scrutiny over appearance. Basic needs like toilet access during periods are restricted. While over 60% felt girls could approach staff about sexism, many didn't feel safe, and reports are dismissed as just a joke. Pupils demand better education, staff training, and accountability. One pupil said, "Violence should be called violence and not excused as flirting. This is a schools-wide issue needing urgent action." Only 15% said girls feel comfortable talking about their periods. Many felt uncomfortable or unsure. Less than half believed that girls could easily get free period products in schools, and about 41% girls can leave class during their period, but over 40% said they couldn't. Fewer than 30% felt boys were educated about periods, indicating poor menstrual education. Over 70% reported periods or hormones being used negatively against girls through teasing or unfair assumptions. Pupils described embarrassment, stigma, and a lack of support. Some schools lack basic period products despite promoting period dignity. Students called for stigma-free education for all students, better access to products and facilities, and more empathy from staff. One person said, "Periods should be talked about. They are natural, of course, but when you've been taught for years to hide it, it becomes ingrained." Schools need open, supportive environments respecting period dignity.
My name is Dara, and I'd like to talk about the questions in the survey relating to curriculum and uniform. So the survey explored pupils' experiences with relationships and sexuality education, including topics taught, lesson quality, teacher confidence, and gender stereotypes. About 67% had received RSE lessons, though some were unsure what RSE meant. Coverage varied. Only 36% learned about sexism or women's rights, 58% learned about healthy relationships, and 52% learned about consent. Many found RSE to be outdated, superficial, or delivered too late. Religious influence and fear-based messaging were common concerns. Pupils want more inclusive RSE covering consent, LGBTQ+ issues, and emotional and women's health, taught earlier and consistently. Respondents said that many teachers were uncomfortable discussing sensitive topics affecting lesson quality. RSE was also often gender segregated, especially in primary schools, reinforcing gaps in understanding. Nearly 73% said subject choices are shaped by gender stereotypes from society, teachers, and peers. Girls remain underrepresented in STEM, whilst boys are discouraged from subjects like childcare. Pupils called for a gender-neutral curriculum, embarrassment-free RSE, and school cultures challenging stereotypes. They stressed teaching respect, consent, and life skills early to prevent sexism. The uniform section covered girls' comfort in uniforms and PE kits, trouser options, gender-neutral uniforms, and non-uniform day rules. Around 57% said girls felt comfortable in their uniforms, and nearly 25% said they weren't. PE kit comfort was higher at 62%, and opinions on trouser options were divided: 36% yes, 34% no, and 23% unsure. Nearly half supported gender-neutral uniforms, and about a quarter opposed. Over half said girls face stricter clothing rules on non-uniform days. Many criticised uniforms as outdated and unfair, especially for girls. Girls wearing trousers faced negative labelling, and transgender pupils felt excluded, especially in single-sex schools. A handful of boys questioned double standards, asking why they couldn't wear skirts. Cost and comfort were also concerns, with uniforms described as itchy and heavy. While some valued uniforms for equality, Most wanted freedom to wear what makes them feel safe and respected without judgment or punishment.
My name is Nadia. I want to talk about policy. Most pupils, 72%, believe schools should have sexism policies, but 64% weren't sure if theirs did. Those who were reported mixed results, from little impact to greater awareness and empowerment, especially in girls' schools. Many felt policies were poorly communicated, inconsistently enforced or ignored, with sexist behaviour often unpunished. Pupils called for stronger enforcement, clearer communication, gender inclusivity, better transgender support, and practical changes like flexible uniforms. They want genuine commitment and meaningful action against sexism. Over 77% of respondents were unaware of the new Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy launched in 2024. Still, most strongly support its goals. Over 70% backed aims like understanding violence, promoting respect, and improving justice and support. Nearly 80% felt schools should teach the strategy. Pupils welcomed EVOG as important and urged it to be more inclusive of all genders and violence types. They stressed earlier education and cultural change, especially challenging harmful attitudes among boys and men. Many said awareness alone isn't enough. Real accountability and lasting changes are essential. Final general comments. About 88% were not surprised by the survey's contents, showing strong awareness of sexism in schools. Those surprised noted that topics like gender-based violence and women's rights are rarely discussed. One said, 70% of questions really surprised me. Many boys, especially in all-boys schools, felt excluded and uncomfortable. I go to an all-boys school. How am I supposed to know any of this? And as a male, I do not think I should comment on girls' periods. Others felt the survey focused too much on girls. Too many girl questions, it gets annoying and stupid. About half believed schools could do more to tackle sexism, calling for better education and open conversations. One summed up, some teachers don't really care about problems there can be with girls and women. The survey highlighted gaps in education and awareness. Some pupils were shocked by the scale of violence girls face. My friends and me have been touched and shouted walking up the town after school. Others questioned boys' limited representation. Why is there nothing about boys? And they're heavily exaggerating a lot about women. Overall, the survey showed a lack of education on gender equality and safety, but found that when taught well, peoples of all genders can engage meaningfully. As one pupil concluded, I think the things they're standing for are pretty good. We just need to hear more about them in school.
My name is Caleb. I'm sharing the Youth Assembly Rights and Equality Committee's 8 key recommendations to advance young women's rights in schools. Shaped by research, expert input, and the voices of young people. Tackle gender norms and stereotypes from an early age. Pupils want respect, consent, and emotional expression taught across all genders, not just in policy, but in everyday teaching. Schools should work with parents to reinforce shared values. Review and reform uniform policies. Young people call for uniforms that are comfortable, inclusive, and fair. Rules should not place unfair burdens on girls, especially during puberty or in hot weather. Respect, not dress codes, should guide school culture. Improve reporting systems. Pupils need safe, trusted ways to report harassment, including anonymous options, and train staff who take concerns seriously and act on them. Address issues inclusively. Pupils highlighted that gender-based harm often overlaps with racism and identity-based discrimination. Staff need training to understand and respond to these complexities. Equip pupils to navigate online misogyny. Schools should offer digital literacy lessons to help pupils critically assess harmful online content and promote respectful, inclusive behaviour, especially among boys. Foster a culture of respect and accountability. Pupils want consistent practice, not just posters and assemblies. Inclusion should be visible every day. Introduce sexism policies in all schools. These should clearly define, prevent, and address sexist behaviour, supporting a safe and respectful environment for all. Promote youth voice. Young people must be involved in shaping the policies that affect them. Their lived experiences should guide this change. Thank you for listening. We'd like to hear your thoughts on our work. We'd like your views on the following questions. Do you agree with our recommendations? And what is your advice on the next steps? And how can we ensure it has a maximum impact?
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was really powerful presentation there, and it's obviously you put a lot of work into it, so really appreciate you coming to the committee to provide us with this update. I certainly think that all the recommendations are spot on. I think that what occurs to me is that I left school 34 years ago, and nothing seems to have changed. It just seems to have stayed the same. So that actually was very disheartening to see that, despite wider awareness of these issues, that the culture in schools remain. I think that, well, first of all, it's great. We as a committee, the Executive Office, have responsibility for equality, so we will reflect on how we can look at this. But I suppose a lot of this does sit with the Education Minister. For example, the work at the minute around the school uniforms bill, and I'm just wondering, have you fed into that, and what are your thoughts in terms of how that could be shaped and is being shaped?
We have gave evidence to the school uniform bill, and we have gave our recommendations before.
Okay. Was that around to sort of gender neutral, or?
Yes.
Partly, yes. And we, as you mentioned, we had presented a report to the Junior Minister O'Reilly, who said that she would share it with her fellow executive colleagues. So.
Okay, that's good. I suppose the other, so that's at the top end in terms of the government, but what about the schools individually in terms of their leadership, their principals? I was dealing with a case there recently where a parent was very concerned that the rugby team was getting such preferential support where the girls' hockey team wasn't, and the school sort of tried to shut it down very quickly and said nothing to see here. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of how you can get the schools to adopt some of the, or recognise some of the findings and adopt some of your recommendations.
A lot of that would come from student voice and encouraging students to take action within their own skills. I know in my school personally, John McCluskey mentioned in the report, started a Female Voices project in my school, and I've been part of that for almost 2 years now. And because of the action I've taken through student voice, I've seen a change in our school. I mean, we came up with a change in curriculum design around International Women's Day, and for workshops educating students on becoming an anti-sexist. And it's a student-led project despite it being led by a teacher. And I think that the student voice is how you promote change in schools, because while schools might not necessarily listen to suggestions made by committees or by Stormont, they're forced to listen to their students' voices in that way through student councils and through action groups.
Okay, thank you. I suppose just one last one from me really, and that's around the free period products, and I just want to know how widespread the availability is from your survey. I almost assumed that schools had almost universally adopted that policy of having the basket in the women's toilets. Is that something you delved into in terms of availability and trying to be supportive?
That is in the report. It did seem to be quite inconsistent, and even speaking to other members of the Youth Assembly, it seemed few and far between how available period products were. Like, if I were to speak from my own experience, I would say that period products are very freely available in my own school. But I know that especially in co-ed schools, that seems to be not so consistent, or maybe those products are poorly treated, or not maintained properly by whoever's in charge of them, whether that be school nurse, school council.
Okay, so there's a good wee bit of work to go in that space. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go to Claire, please. Go ahead, please, Claire. Thank you.
And thank you all for presenting. It was really powerful. It was really incredible, and I agree with a lot of the recommendations. Just want to pick up on two, just because I'm sort of involved in some of them myself, and it's just in relation to the school uniforms. I've tabled an amendment to the school uniforms bill, which is around allowing girls to wear trousers, as well as, I suppose, boys being allowed to wear skirts as well, and that's absolutely fine. So I'm keen to hear your views on that. And the other, and maybe these two kind of link as well, is around how we teach in schools, because a lot of people who would have opposition to RSE within schools would talk about parental choice, and that being a role for the parents and the family. I'm just keen to hear your thoughts on that, because is that happening? How can we even support parents in doing that? So those 2 points.
You'd like to take that one? Go ahead, please.
Just the second point
Yes,
first,
go
just
ahead.
To do with RSE and teaching these sorts of things, which is that first and foremost, I think the Youth Assembly would call to be teaching lessons proportionally and to do with the age from an early age. I think that I personally don't see an issue with teaching certain forms of consent to older primary school children. I personally don't see an issue with that. In terms of the pulling out of RSE education, one thing which we had spoken about in terms of parents teaching their students, which is that if your parents don't agree with what's being taught in RSE and they pull you from those lessons, you're unlikely to be taught that at home if your parents don't agree with it being taught in school. So there's a risk there of no education in terms of consent or periods and in any sort of education like that not being taught at all. So I think it's important that we promote RSE in schools. I do still think it is important that parents have the options to pull their children from RSE if they feel for cultural or religious reasons that that's not okay, but it is important that across Northern Ireland that RSE education is taught well and it's taught by dedicated teachers rather than a one period from an outside organisation.
Yeah. Somebody else want to take the first part of that around the school uniforms piece?
Yes, but sorry, can I just quickly jump on the end of that? If the first point that I had mentioned was about tackling gender norms and stereotypes from an early age, and towards the end of that I mentioned how schools should be working with parents to try and reinforce shared values, and I think this could also be communicating with parents in the area of if there is a specific issue that is very prevalent in that area, find out what the parents think of it and how it could almost be specifically tackled as well, which is just cooperation between the two.
Yeah.
And then for where we stand on the uniform, I think a lot of what we had seen was not saying that, we have to change the uniform in specific ways, but you get to almost choose if, regardless of your gender or how you identify, if you would like to wear a skirt, you can wear a skirt. If you would like to wear trousers, you can wear trousers. And from what we saw, that was widely what the youth thought as well from the responses from these surveys, that the choice is what people want, not even whether they would take it or not, but just the freedom to be able to pick.
Fair enough. Okay. You, Claire?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that's a really sensible approach, and particularly in relation to the first one, that it's not schools or parents, it's a collaboration of both. And I think that's absolutely, 100%. If I can squeeze a very quick one in there as well, and I've been picking up on this generally just because of the conversation we're having around addressing violence against women and girls and what we have to do to change the behaviour of boys and men, that do that type of thing. And boys are starting to feel almost undermined and excluded in that conversation. How do we help them be part of this conversation? Because we all recognise it's not every boy and man, but there is certainly a trend and a pattern there. So how do we ensure that our peers are not behaving this way? How do we call it out? How do we ensure that everyone is kept safe by looking at it in terms of where the issue is?
Well, I would like to come onto this one. Yes, they may be feeling undermined and excluded because we are obviously focusing so predominantly on the violence against women and girls, but that is obviously because if you look at this survey here, that's the massive problem. But I think about, again, inclusion, promoting youth voice, not just youth voice of females, but of men as well. Because, as I said, if men are just constantly almost told this issue is here because of you, well then that would cause many issues. That could almost worsen the problem. So if we work with both men, women, or transgender pupils and students, then that will just help broaden the horizons to see what the men think could help other men or boys of their age as well.
Could I add
Thank you,
something?
that's really valuable.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Could I add something to that?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I think it also stands to reason that we remember that the values we're suggesting in this, where we talk about emotional expression, respect, fairness, inclusivity, in teaching, if we're specifically talking about boys and young men, in teaching them those values, those stand to benefit them later in life. I mean, I know right now we may not see the effects of this, but years to the future, if we stick to this, you'll see young men in the workplace, in friendship groups and families who have a lot of respect in their hearts for their female colleagues, for their female friends, that I don't think we're seeing enough of right now. I just think it has a benefit for their own personal development outside of that.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
So you clear? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. Carol, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your report and coming in front of the committee today. So I agree with all your recommendations. Just on the last point, first, I do think that we're mindful, we need to be proportionate, that in terms of, even if you look at attitudes, and certainly the working of violence against women and girls, that it's always something that's negative, so we're always very conscious of it. But reading some of the commentary in your report, particularly around attitudes to girls in uniforms, is quite shocking, I have to say. It is quite shocking. And I hope that your report goes to every school. I would hope that. I'm sure Lucy can arrange that for you, because you can arrange a lot. Isn't that right, Lucy? But I do think it's shocking, and irrespective of how people feel, particularly around issues of race in schools, that this is something that's come out of a forum that is part of this. So you have been democratically elected through your forum, as we're democratically elected through here, and I think it's important that this, for me, should be a take note to all the political parties. So I want to say well done, and I would expect to see us back at this in some other form in later years, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Harry, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just in your survey, you've obviously you've asked lots of people, lots of questions, lots of issues. I was just wondering, you yourselves, maybe each of you could tell us, and your answers and your replies, were you surprised, or was it exactly what you expected to come back?
Start at your end. Go ahead, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sure that differs between each of the members. I know me personally, as a girl in a co-ed school, I wasn't surprised by the fact that misogyny exists in schools, because I faced it. I've been there. But like the extent to which, like systemically, how girls face misogyny in schools, like the lack of period products, or like even how teachers treated students, is something that I'd never faced personally. So that was slightly surprising to me. But it isn't surprising at all that misogyny is happening in schools. I've been there, so not really. No, it wasn't surprising.
Okay, go ahead, Caleb.
And I would mostly be the same. I'm in a co-ed school, and I suppose when I was not really focused on looking at other people and what their issues would have been, it may have just gone by not noticed, because it was almost so normal,
Yes.
which is also part of the problem, I suppose. But when you just lifted your head and looked around, you could see it almost everywhere. So I would say I'm not surprised at all, and then that's from me not personally experiencing it, but also it's reports from friends and my sister as well, who have experienced things like this and have said about it. I would kind of, not really notice as much until I just looked around, and then looking at the survey afterwards, it was just exactly what I saw in my own school almost.
Okay, go ahead, please, Dara.
So I sort of knew that sexism was obviously very present as it was, but after working with the Rights and Equality Committee and after we worked on the survey, I was shocked to the extent to which it was like it is everywhere. Like even going to school afterwards, like with teachers, with students, with the curriculum, with uniform, like there's sexism everywhere, and that was something that I didn't really see at the start. So now after we have done that survey, and obviously we're presenting it to you, like it's just, I had no idea the extent to which sexism was so prevalent, and it creeps its way in everywhere. You know, in schools, I'm sure in all schools everywhere there is sexism in every single part of school life, which is really, really worrying, and it was something that I didn't know existed. So I think it's something that we really have to try and battle and combat.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nadia, please.
Yeah, going to the same school as Caleb, I wasn't shocked at all by the results. I've been a big advocate for women's voices, and seeing the results of this survey, I was not shocked at all. For example, the uniforms, with most girls feeling uncomfortable in their uniforms, it's a very prevalent issue with girls especially being targeted when it comes to scrutiny towards their uniform and regulations. For example, with PE uniforms, I'm not sure, some schools might have this rule where they sell skirts, however you're not allowed to go outside with them after school because it's seen as indecent. But looking through most of the stuff in the survey, the one thing I would say I was shocked about is period dignity and the fact that some schools don't have that kind of access to free period products as some other might. Like our school has really good period facilities, but overall I'm not shocked, and I think something really needs to be done here about this issue.
Thank you, Nadia. Go ahead, please.
Overall, with the whole report, I wasn't surprised really at all. Again, as everybody else has said, we see it every day in school. I think as well, just the people who were filling in the report, they were not surprised at all. On page 56 of the report, there was a dedicated question to ask, have any of the issues in this survey surprised you? And of the 1,137 people who were filling in the report, 1,000 responded no. So I think that just speaks for itself as well. And what actually did surprise me more than anything was that as the Assembly team were analysing it, that they were surprised in a way at the scale of it. And I think it just goes to show that this can be overlooked, I think, sometimes, and that I think, again, as everyone has said, the systemic nature of it and just how deep it goes into all aspects of school life, that if you can get by ignoring it and you can pretend it's not there and you can try and exclude yourself from those areas and those issues, but it's still there and people need to take action, and the schools need to work with the students in their schools to fix these issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Harry?
Yeah, maybe even not for them all to answer if we haven't time, but how did you come up with your questions in your survey?
We had through our multiple committee sessions, we had come together and we had compiled the majority of the questions. The Assembly team obviously tweaked some of them slightly, but throughout all stages of the formation of the survey, we were involved in confirming if we approved.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
See you Monday.
Thank you, Carol. Anya, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, folks, for coming in. Just as you were speaking there, I was trying to remember myself, how many years has it been since I left school? 10 years this month.
Oh, right,
so,
well, you're a youngster.
Only a child. But I suppose even comparing my own experience in school, when I did leave in 2015, Snapchat was in its infancy at that stage. Now I have heard obviously horror stories in relation to misogyny through social media channels like Snapchat, and it has evolved now. I think TikTok seems to be the main social media app that young people do use. In terms of linking that to the rise of misogyny and misogynistic characters like Andrew Tate, do you think that there is a direct correlation between social media usage with young people, in particular young men, and misogyny?
I'd definitely like to confirm that, yeah. And I think it goes even deeper than the social media that young people use. They migrate from sites like TikTok and Instagram into like forums and chat rooms like Reddit. And like the attitudes, the sort of casual cultural attitudes of misogyny that are very pervasive on TikTok and Instagram among young people, that you actually might casually proliferate, like ourselves. Eventually that gets a bit darker and more sinister, and when you migrate to chat rooms and forums, you find like-minded people, and that eventually that evolves into what we would call like probably like high-level incidents like rape, murder, sexual assault, gendercide, and that's why social media is directly linked to what we're talking about, to violence against women and girls, because the attitudes that we're talking about, the outcome one in the EVOG strategy, that eventually escalates. So it's important that we take like a grassroots approach, and what we're talking about in dealing of attitudes in schools, that hopefully would stop entirely, but I doubt it. The huge issues that come later in life of murder and rape against women, the violence.
Yeah, and I suppose even in relation to, as you say, chat rooms like Reddit, there has been numerous serious incidents that have happened worldwide off the back of some of the content on those chat rooms. The prevalence, and again I've no data on this, but there has to be some sort of correlation between social media and even incels as well. Just one final question in relation to misogynistic behaviour being learned through social media and indeed in the home. Is that something that, and I don't think there was a question specific on that, but is that something that you have picked up throughout your research? In terms of the misogynistic behaviour itself, is it more likely to be learned at home or through social media, or maybe even a mixture of both? Because I would suspect from an educational point of view, from a teacher's point of view, it must be very, very difficult for them to try and impart change on young people, young men in particular, whilst that young person is listening to X, Y or Z in their own home.
I suppose both are true. I mean, gender stereotypes begin at a very young age in schools especially, but a lot of maybe cultural values, religious values also are at play in the home, and thus whenever you see children come into primary schools and then later secondary schools, I think it's very difficult to break cultural norms around women and misogyny and maybe violence against women as well, which is why I think what Caleb said about working in tandem with parents is so important. Because sometimes in working with parents, like they might unlearn themselves their own biases, or that maybe learn to change how they think about women, how they think about violence against women. So that's why I think working together is so important, rather than separating the roles of parents in schools, like combining them and encouraging them to work together to create policies, lesson plans, curriculums, etc.
Absolutely. And just one final question from me, Chair, I suppose, and again, like Carol, I do agree with all of the recommendations that you have set out. In terms of us as a committee, what would your advice for us to be with your recommendations? What would you encourage us to do with them through this committee? Obviously, TEO has policy remit over EVOG itself. You have mentioned the school uniform policy that sits with DE, but have you any recommendations or suggestions for us?
In my opinion, I feel like we need to start education at an early age, and we need to teach age appropriate content. But at a very young age, the things that you're taught at a very young age, a lot of that can stem into what you believe when you're older. So if you're looking about lessons of consent or when to say no, that stuff can be taught very early on. Healthy relationships, healthy friendships, that stuff stems into what you're learning later on in RSE. So I think it's very important to have mandatory lessons at young ages as well, because I think, as you were saying earlier, about the mixture, it can be on social media or it can be stuff that pupils learn at home that's misogynistic. I feel like if we educate and if we tell people that like this isn't okay and we teach them at a young age, then that can definitely go on. And then on top of that, I think introducing school policies, which covers, basically just like a whole umbrella, because a lot of the time policy is hidden under anti-bullying, I feel like it's very important
Yeah.
to introduce anti-sexism policies as well.
Set it out separately from.
Definitely, yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anya. And Brian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in today and for your involvement in the Youth Assembly. Hope you've found that interesting for yourselves, and thank you for your report to us. On a positive note, I would say that I hope even during your time you'll have seen an increase in the number of female MLAs, the number of female councillors. So I think definitely progress has been made there, and I think the age range is also, average age is coming down as time goes by. So I think there are more opportunities. When I think back to my time at school, I think there's definitely more opportunities for girls now, particularly in sports, you know, and I think there was more stereotyping, you know, years ago over what sports girls could play. So I think there's signs of progress. I listened to what you've said about social media, which I acknowledge that there's a lot of pressure on young people, and sometimes I think less is more, you know, and it just seems to be all these, you're mentioning apps I haven't heard of and so on, and some of them, I've heard of some, but so you couldn't keep up with them all, you know, and there's, I think it's good not to aim to keep up with them all, because it just can apply more and more pressure. In terms of school uniforms, could you say a wee bit more? I think one of you had a question about trousers, and there was a range of views. I mean, I'm not convinced about. I'm not sure what's meant by gender-neutral uniform. You know, I think it's not necessary to take a negative view of all differences between boys and girls. You know, and there will be some differences. You know, in uniform, and it shouldn't be like a rush to think, oh, we can't have any difference. You know. So I'm not sure who said that about. Could you say a wee bit more about the views? And as you know, that's a live debate now politically. I think it's going to be left up to individual schools, boards of governors is the general direction at the moment. Could you say a wee bit more about your results on that? I forget who said.
I'll just, based on what you said about gender neutral, that could also just be, as I said, about having the choice of whether you would rather wear the trousers or the skirt, if that's the options there is in the school. That alone could almost make it gender neutral. It's not just like, with girls, if you want to wear trousers, you have to almost go and ask to have an exception made for you, things like that. It's entirely up to them.
Some schools do have that policy, is that right, currently?
I think so. Ours doesn't.
It seems a bit inconsistent again from
It
policy
does
to
exist
policy.
somewhere, is that right?
Yes.
I would say so, yeah.
Right.
But there are signs of good practice with all things. There are signs and examples of good practice, but it needs to be universal to ensure that all students have the same equal experience and opportunities.
Okay.
If I could just add to that, I feel like when pupils are given the choice to wear either a skirt or trousers, then you sort of see, because this was introduced in my school, where there are a lot of females who now wear trousers, and as the years have went on and on, I'm now lower sixth, I've noticed a lot more girls wearing trousers, and I noticed that there's a lot less of a stigma now about girls they have to wear skirts, they can't wear trousers. So I think it's really good in terms of attitudes as well. You know, people aren't judging girls for wearing trousers at all. So I think it's just what we're pushing for is for choice and for equality. So I think it's very important.
It also, It also creates like just comfortability of just being in school in general. I mean, we did say in the survey there was issues with, for example, male teachers looking at girls' skirts or looking under tables to look at girls' skirts. So just having that option in general of being able to feel more comfortable in your school uniform and to not have to worry about something like that happening should be available for all students. That's my opinion.
Okay. One of you said about feedback about why was there not more in the survey about boys. Now, obviously, it was a survey about young women's experience, I think, in school, or attitudes to young women. Can you say a wee bit more about that then? Some felt you should be, well, maybe it was boys filling it in and thinking this is all about girls, or what's the feedback on that, or what were you getting issues brought up that people thought are worth exploring?
I think it's really important with all things to do with the end of violence against women. It's that we ensure that we do not alienate boys, and that we ensure that we bring them into discussion, because they are the second biggest stakeholder in the discussion, and so it's really important to bring them in. In terms of comments that were made, there was I'm sure I haven't looked through all of the responses, but from some of the responses that we have looked at, there are areas where potentially there is more to explore there. But I think that the fact that there were comments from mostly boys, negative comments to do with the survey, and the fact that it focused so much on women, that in a way shows that there is an issue in society, and that there is an issue that potentially they either feel alienated or that they don't feel that they can comment on the issue. There was a comment from a boy in a boys only school. I don't have it here right now, but it was along the lines that they felt that they didn't have to comment on these things. It was specifically, I think, to do with women's periods, and that it's to show that they need to be included in the conversation, and they need to feel comfortable to be included in the conversation.
But I feel like with some of the comments just are heavily exaggerating about girls and women. It's just them not reading into the survey and just filling it in. For example, I was looking through, but they're exaggerating all about women, too many girl questions, that gets annoying and stupid. Just the general problem with, it was a very small majority of people, like less than 10 people, boys commenting something like that. But in general, it's just not reading properly into the survey and just maybe not even looking at the title, which was Young Women's Rights in Schools.
Right.
I'll just, follow up on what James said, the quote he was looking for. I just found it here for him. There was two. I go to an all-boys school. How am I supposed to know any of this? And then someone else said, as a male, I do not think I should comment on girls' periods. Just to show what he said there.
Okay. Well, I suppose at some stage, well, might be a future assembly does something looking at issues for boys. I mean, I'm on the board of governors of an all boys school, the boys model. Okay, Luke, thanks for your feedback.
Okay, go ahead, Timothy, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I suppose start off with a word of encouragement. I always like to see people get involved in politics at a young age. An excellent opportunity. Well done in your 18 months for participating. One of the things I suppose at the start I wanted to pick up on, there was concerns raised within the survey. Is there an understanding that if things are happening within a school, them issues are reported to the principal? They're reported, if they're not dealt with satisfactorily, referred to the Board of Governors? Because there's things you have pinpointed and highlighted in your survey that concerns me. If I was on the Board of Governors of one of them schools, I would certainly want to know that pupils are raising them issues. Was that something that came through in your survey, or would you feel in your school that if you raised a complaint and you felt it wasn't dealt with, is there awareness of then taking that further to the Board of Governors?
Well, just to say, at the end of the survey, we did put a number of helplines at the end, just in case there was something going on. But a lot of students did raise the issue that they felt that whenever they did take their problems to the appropriate teacher, in my case, my school would advise that you go to maybe a child safety officer, in which case something would be done about that. If there was an interest in child safety, that was at stake there. But I think a lot of issues of casual misogyny, the attitudes that we're talking about, or the unwanted behaviours, those low-level incidents as such, whenever those are reported to, say, classroom teachers at the time they occur, they're not dealt with seriously. And I think a lot of girls might feel as though their safety or what's happened to them isn't important enough to be raised to their principal or their Board of Governors, which is worrying. Because if we're raising a generation of girls that feel that their safety is not important to be of concern to law enforcement, to people of authority, that speaks to the fact that there is a problem in schools that will later affect us in society. So I do think that comes through in the survey, yeah.
If the problems are in schools, it's hardly a surprise then the problem exists when people leave schools. If that's something that is learned and allowed to breed, essentially, in the school environment. So that's something that really concerns me. I'm very passionate about the End of Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, but it's trying to pinpoint of where we can make the maximum impact. And what you're saying in front of me is one of the big issues, is school, and that's where obviously we need to start off with, of trying to turn that trend. Would that be a fair comment?
That's a fair
I
point to
think,
make.
yeah, that would be a very good comment, but not only in schools, just in general, the entirety of a person's youth. So, because obviously there's many outside organisations that someone can get involved in. Obviously, mostly we're targeting schools because that's one that affects pretty much, well, it will affect every young person. So, but understanding that it's everything in their youth, as we had said about including parents and their home lives, that's another thing that will massively impact how they act as an adult. So just understanding we can try and improve schools as much as possible, but we do need to include outside organisations and parents and families in the matter as well.
Go ahead, Nadia.
I feel like if students go to teachers or like principals, for example, about kind of misogynistic behaviour and they are excused, then it might create this kind of thought in their head, well, if they're excusing it, then that means the higher ups, the ones on the board of governors, will excuse it as well, because if my issue is not important to my principal, then why should it be important to the board of governors? But that's just...
If I could just add to that, see, our third, just on what Nadia was saying there, our third recommendation to advance young women's rights in schools is to improve reporting systems. So we need better ways to report these incidents to ensure that, you know, pupils have a safe space to go to and they can have someone to talk to and they can feel safe and protected in schools, so that these incidents, they can report them.
That question came from when I was at school. I wasn't overly aware. You went to your teacher and if the teacher didn't do anything about it, well, that's where it was left. Whereas now when you're on a board of governors, you see there's actually more processes that you can go and speak to your principal, you can report it to the board of governors through your parents or whoever, and there is avenues to try and get a resolution if there is a problem. A couple of questions then. 1,137 responses. Is that in target? You know, what sort of a response were you looking from your young women's rights survey? 68% of the female, because this issue, you know, involves young boys. How do we grow that audience to have more people taking part?
The first key thing here is we don't want boys or young men to feel that, although in the majority, in a large number of circumstances where the issues like that and sexism and it moves on to violence, it typically is men who are the perpetrators. But it's really important that we don't alienate men in the discussion or make them feel as if this is entirely their problem, make them feel down in a way about the conversation.
All about encouraging them and involving
definitely,
them.
And encouraging. And I think one thing that Caleb has mentioned before, just in different committee meetings that we've had, was to do with that a lot of the time, and again, very stereotypical of me to say, but a lot of the time boys will be involved in an outside organisation, potentially sport. So potentially working through sporting organisations as well, in school and outside of school, to raise these issues is a really good way of getting into the sort of circles and their groups as well. And we were really quite happy that a third of respondents were boys. I don't think many of us were expecting to have that high of a percentage. So I just think that there's definitely work to be done to ensure that we get more boys and young men into this conversation, and there are avenues to do that with.
Sorry, I'm just going to hop on with what James said there. It is something I actually I think is very good, because a lot of boys who do go to sports, especially if they're doing it at any high level, they can build very good relationships with their coaches. That's a lot of trust, and that's often because it's not a school environment where relationships between pupils and teachers can be strained by rules and so on, whereas with coaches they can almost have a much more friendly or seemingly a more parental role in their life. So if they are the ones delivering or encouraging these lessons, well, then that can have a much larger impact as well. So not only is it still reaching a large audience, but it's the impact it has per person it reaches as well, I think, is another reason why what James brought up there is a very good idea.
one of your outcomes was combat online misogyny. As a society, how do we police that? How do we call that out? How do we prevent it from happening?
In part, it's awareness in schools, because again, nearly we're all in schools, and it's very difficult, I think, for government to combat that online. I think there will always be places online for people to express their sexist and misogynist opinions. So by combating it in schools and at that young age, and making people aware that there are people online who will say these things, and that first and foremost, that if you're a victim of misogynist comments online, that there are avenues and ways for you to report that. But secondly, just for guys and for young men and for all people, that online, that making those comments doesn't lead to anything good, and it only leads to putting more people down, and can eventually lead, as we've seen in the violence against women. There was I want to say it was the triangle. There was a pyramid to do with how...
the triangle gender-based violence.
What page is it?
Page 17, I think.
Page 17. Yes, the pyramid of gender-based violence, that systemic inequalities and damaging culture is at the bottom. So if we can tackle online misogyny through schools, starting there, it completely prevents everything that happens after that leading on to larger issues to do with gender-based violence.
And final question to you is, TEO has spent like £2 million, divided it out to local councils to target ending violence against women and girls in their local areas. How do you believe that? What sort of initiatives would you like to see run? You're talking about targeting in schools, so it's coming through very clear for me that instead of potentially in communities, you would like to see more of a focus on education in early years, further education. Have you any ideas what local councils should be targeting, or where they should be targeting that money?
I think in certain community spaces there's a great opportunity for education as well. I mean, I know in my local community, a lot of youth groups would probably be a great place for local councils to focus efforts on educating young people, men and women, on misogyny, and especially online misogyny. I know my local GAA club did a couple of numbers a few years back now on online behaviour, and I think if something like that could be brought back, that would be really, really helpful. And I know some programmes like White Ribbon do a lot of work in prisons and juvenile centres, and I think that's an area that a lot of councils are maybe neglecting because it's quite niche. It's a minority we don't often think about. So I think those sort of programmes would be very, very useful for local councils to focus on in local communities anyway, outside of school.
I think it is very important that we focus on these projects that Ellie has just mentioned there. But if I go back to what Nadia had mentioned, over 77% of the respondents of the survey were completely unaware of the strategy, and then over 70% backed the aims of the strategy, and 80% felt that it should be taught. So that can almost highlight that even just making it more publicly known to young people, because there's clearly a massive support from young people. They clearly, as we can see in the survey alone, they agree with this and they want to see it taught, they want to see it succeed. So increasing awareness doesn't have to be through big campaigns or big events, just to make it known, either whether it's in schools or however else you'd feel would reach the most people. Something that simple could massively impact and support the strategy alone.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you. I'm going to make some suggestions, just so you are here to hear them. Sometimes we discuss our actions as people leave, but I'm wondering, should we write to the Education Authority to ask them to respond to the report? Have you done this? Have you written? Okay. So to write to the Education Authority to, I'm thinking picking up, for example, in terms of Timothy's question there around reporting systems, and I'm just wondering, some of these would be specific to the Education Authority, but we also write to the Department of Education to ask them again to respond, and then pass it on to the Directorate within the Executive Office because the directorate that is responsible for the end of violence against women and girls strategy, they're coming before us in September. So if we could give them this report now, so that they could then speak to it in terms of the delivery plan. So, and then, but what we can do is we can keep you posted with all our responses and stuff. Any other suggestions? Go ahead, please.
When we're writing to education, could we just maybe ask what steps the department taken to embed and violence against women and girls into schools, whether it's through curriculum, whether it's through I don't know if it's still going, LLW, Learning for Life from Work. I think that'd be an opportunity.
Any other suggestions from this?
Have they responded to us when we put out what they're doing within the department yet, have they?
Yeah, they did, but I don't think it was necessarily as in depth as what Anya suggested there. But maybe we could, in the first instance, share the response we did get and talked about earlier.
No problem.
Okay, go ahead, Claire.
That was sort of what I was suggesting earlier on.
Okay.
In relation to the work of ending violence against women and girls, how is it? What are the tangible actions potentially happening within the departments? Maybe a better way to put it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other suggestions from this side of the? No. Okay. So, how do we communicate? Is it through yourself? Okay. So any correspondence, we'll send it, and then you can disseminate it. I'm conscious that there's other members towards the back there. Have you any questions or any burning issue? No. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but sometimes you could be sitting the whole way through the session and think, "Gosh, I wish I could get the chance to say something." Any?
Very kind of you, because we were obviously everybody wants to present,
yes.
So we had to kind of make a choice. Ross, I wouldn't mind if you were able to and you felt able to share, not the name of your school, but the fact that we discussed earlier about some of the female teachers in your school. If you were able to say something about that, would be maybe helpful.
So
okay, thank you.
An all-boys school, I won't say the name of it, but I find that a lot of the students at the school treat the female teachers differently. Very differently, for a matter of fact, than the male teachers. So last year, one of the teachers actually had a breakdown because a few of the students would just refuse to do work in her class.
Oh gosh, okay.
But they would do the work in the other English class.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine without fail. So everyone started calling it a sexist breakdown because I started like making fun of her.
Okay.
It was horrendous to watch it.
Yes.
Because I have her for lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just throughout the school as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
And the boys, maybe, I don't know if you'd like to say something about the fact that at the start there were reservations as a whole group, because there's actually 30 in this group who wanted to be part. And I think there were questions among some of the boys, can we do this as boys? Is this a project for us? But actually you'll see now they're probably some of the biggest advocates in the group. I don't know if any of them want to talk about that.
Yeah, I will, because out of however many of us were present when we were deciding what topic to look at within our committee, I think I was actually the only person who was there, but who didn't vote for this topic. As I said, I was looking in myself. I hadn't really looked out at
That's fair enough.
all their problems, so I hadn't noticed it. But now that I am here, and I was at the start of it forced into it, but then I saw how big a problem it was, and it was no longer forced. I was actually wanting to be here. Yeah, I was wanting to be here and willing to do the work. So I would say definitely raising awareness would be a massive thing, because when I was kind of just looking in, not really looking at other people, I didn't notice it, didn't think it was a big problem, but now I realise how massive a problem it is. I do want to actually get to work on it.
Okay, no, thank you. That's very brave of you to say that. And thank you. Ladies at the back, anything? No?
I'd just like to say,
please.
whenever you were asking the question, I was thinking in my head, what would I say? And everyone, they just said what I was thinking.
Oh, that's good. That's good, that's good. Well, listen, thanks again. Honestly, really, really appreciated your contribution, and it will feed into our work going forward. So thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, members. Enjoy your summer. Okay, members, we've just really a few items left to go through, and that's correspondence. So I'm going to refer you to pages 357 to 365 of your pack for the summary of committee correspondence, and the first one we'll get to is 9.7 Committee for Finance Northern Ireland Fiscal Council Bill. You'll find this on pages 426 to 455 of the pack. So just to advise that the committee has received correspondence from the Finance Committee regarding the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council Bill, and in anticipation of the introduction of the bill and its passing second stage, the Finance Committee agreed at its meeting on the 18th of June to seek the views of all Assembly statutory committees and the Audit Committee to allow members the opportunity to comment on issues in the bill which may be of interest as per normal practice. So the bill and the EFM are also attached for correspondence. So I'm asking you to note this and to seek your agreement to write to the Department to ask whether the Department has any views or comments on the bill and whether there are any implications or any role for TEO arising from the bill. Content?
Yeah.
Okay. 9.8. So Committee for Finance, Administration and Financial Provisions Bill, found at pages 456 to 494 of your pack. So the committee has received a correspondence from the Finance Committee in relation to this bill. As there are clauses of the bill that are specific to our committee, the Finance Committee has requested that we take responsibility for considering these clauses and report our findings back to the Finance Committee in due course. Responses regarding clauses 1, 6 to 10 and 14 should be sent back to the Finance Committee by noon on Thursday the 30th of October 2025. So just asking you to note this and to ask your agreement to write to the Department to request in the first instance written briefing on the clauses highlighted that need to be considered and what, if any, impact they will have on the Department. Are we agreed? Yeah. Okay, 9.11 Advice NI. So refer you to pages 501 to 504 of your pack. So the committee has received correspondence from Advice NI regarding the development of a system for reciprocal application of disregards for victims awarded compensation payments to ensure that redress payments issued across UK and Ireland are disregarded for benefit purposes regardless of where in the UK or Ireland the person resides. So just to advise that this issue was discussed during the North-South Ministerial Council oral statement in plenary on Monday 29th of June. The Council welcomed the ongoing North-South engagement on a potential reciprocal agreement to disregard redress payments for means-tested benefits for the Mother and Baby Institutions Pay redress payment scheme, and noted upcoming respective engagements of officials in relation to the forthcoming Truth Recovery redress scheme. So just to note this item of correspondence, and agree to forward Advice NI's correspondence to the Department and ask for an update in terms of next steps following the discussion that took place at the NSMC regarding reciprocal disregard. Agreed? Mm-hmm. Okay, Truth Recovery NI. So refer you to pages 259 to 231 of your pack and page 23 of the tail pack. So just to advise, the committee has received a correspondence from the Truth Recovery NI organisation regarding the inquiry and redress scheme bill. So Truth Recovery NI has been informed of the correct procedure for comments regarding the bill, i.e. via citizen space, and has been encouraged to use this when it becomes live. TRNI are also they're also being put on our stakeholder list for evidence for the committee. So just to advise, the committee has also received correspondence from an individual in relation to concerns in the bill, and just to note that these items of correspondence and also to agree that the committee team reply to the correspondence in relation to the consultation over the summer recess period, signposting them on how to complete the call for evidence via citizen space. Agreed? Okay, so Women's Rights Network Northern Ireland, so refer you to pages 10 to 19 of the table pack, that the Women's Rights Network Northern Ireland has sent correspondence to the committee following our oral evidence session on the 12th of February in relation to the inquiry, to advise that they have provided responses to a number of questions that were raised in the session and provide additional sources where necessary. So I'm asking you to note the correspondence and agree that the response should be updated in the committee's draft final report over the summer recess period. Go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, on that one, I think there's a bit more to be done. There's an element of this where it talks about Northern Ireland Assembly transgender policy, demands staff to use pronouns of visitors, and while we understand the need to show respect to service users, we must also understand the right to freedom of belief of staff. It also allows people to use the toilet of their self-identified gender, which is now unlawful and should be reviewed with urgency. I think there's an element of that where we should refer their remarks to the Commission. This is a body that comes in to Stormont to give evidence, and this is obviously a concern that they have. And then in the next one, the non-armed civil service. Anecdotally, we have been approached by civil servants who have been shocked at the NICS trans inclusion policy written by their LGBT plus network in conjunction with the Rainbow Project, which stated that staff could be disciplined if not using preferred pronouns. We would ask that the TEO committee investigate why an outside organisation was able to write an NICS policy, and if this previously stated requirement on staff to use preferred pronouns is still in place. So I think there's two pieces where we need to refer that to the Assembly Commission and ask them for a response.
Any other views? I think I'm happy for that correspondence to be shared. That's fine.
That's fine.
Okay, so just there's a few other items to note, and I'm going to ask the clerk.
Table pack. Yes, that's in the table pack, Brian. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple more items of correspondence just for members to note. Item 9.2 was the Hansard report from our session on the 18th of June. Item 9.3, a TEO press release entitled No Place for Violence, as First Minister and Deputy First Minister condemning the recent attack on the Islamic Centre in Belfast. Item 9.4 from the Department of Finance regarding the power to appoint an external auditor of the NIAO. Item 9.5, a report from the organisation Pivotal, talking about policy delivery in Northern Ireland. Item 9.6 from the TEV in relation to the gaps of inequality legislation inquiry that the committee is carrying out, and just additional comments. And just to remind members, as agreed at the meeting on the 18th of June, the draft final report will be updated over the summer recess to reflect comments made and will come back to the committee in the next session. Item 9.9 is from the Committee for Communities, and that's around Irish language strategy. Item 9.10, a response from the Northern Health and Social Care Trust to the committee's correspondence of the 23rd of May regarding access to records. And just to note, Chair, that just leaves one response outstanding, which is from the Belfast Health Trust. Item 9.12 is from Newry and Mourne District Council response to the correspondence of the 8th of May in relation to the Local Change Fund. And again, just to note, Chair, only one response now outstanding, and that's from Belfast City Council. 9.13 is a response to the committee's correspondence regarding queries from the Permanent Secretary's oral evidence session on the 28th of May. And just to remind members that following last week's meeting, the committee wrote to the department asking for further details on communities in transition phase 3 projects, which are subject to business case approval. Item 9.15, Committee for Finance correspondence on the analysis of the 25-26 outturn and forecast outturn for the month of May. And finally, item 9.16, correspondence from the head of the Civil Service to the Committee of Communities that this committee was copied into regarding housing, wastewater infrastructure and anti-poverty strategies.
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, anybody want to raise any issues with any other correspondence? Okay, so draft forward work programme, so you'll find this on pages 561 to 563 of your pack. So I'm going to ask the Assistant Clerk to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's just to say that following today with the stakeholder list, we'll now start to schedule briefings for after summer recess. And just during the break as well, quickly was able to speak to the PSNI. So they said that the report currently won't be able to share with victims and survivors as it's not final, but that the final report, and when they conclude the investigation, the report will then be shared with victims and survivors and the wider public.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so any other business? So just to advise, you may wish to the process in relation to FOI requests over the summer recess period. It is standard practice to delegate authority to the Chair and Deputy Chair during periods of recess to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information and any non-routine or contentious freedom of information requests received by the committee, and that any such views expressed will be brought to the attention of the committee at the first meeting after summer. Are we agreed to delegate authority to the Chair and Deputy Chair? Yep. Okay, any other business, members? No? Okay, well thank you very much. The date and time of our next meeting, so obviously we're going into recess. Our next meeting will be Wednesday the 10th of September at 2 p.m, and a reminder that we are then moving into room 21. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, Sound.